Hollywood has been a huge cultural phenomenon for decades. From its beginnings, when it opened its first motion picture studio in 1913, this place has captured our hearts through moments that will live forever in the media. And of course, nothing shines brighter than a Hollywood star. The people who not only share their talent with us, but personify what it means or what it looks like to be the perfect human being. And it seemed like this place had kind of cracked the code. This is where people went if they knew how to win in life. But in the last decade, Hollywood has faced two of its biggest threats: the filtration of the Me Too movement and the rise of social media. For the first time in 100 years, the industry has been exposed for being completely plagued with people who prey on those that they think are beneath them. People who lie and cheat and basically will do whatever it takes to get on top. And over the last few years, a lot of stars have been booted from the success of the industry. And usually we all agree that they are deserving of this punishment, but no story has left people more divided on cancel culture in Hollywood than the story of Jonathan Majors. Jonathan Majors is an actor who, at the beginning of 2023, was described as the fastest rising star in Hollywood. He exploded onto our screens, appearing in back-to-back box office hits. And for the first time in a while, every movie buff was genuinely excited about an up-and-coming actor working their way to the A-list. At the beginning of 2023, an incident took place that not only shocked everyone that knew Jonathan Majors, but caused an immediate downfall of his career. Jonathan Majors felt the full raft of cancel culture. He even left a few movies that were already in production without their leading star. One of these movies was the hugely anticipated new Avengers movie, where Jonathan was cast as a new big baddie, Kang the Conqueror. It's recently been revealed that Jonathan Majors would be replaced by Robert Downey Jr. And this has caused a huge uproar online because RDJ has had his own run-ins with the law. In this video, we will discuss Jonathan Majors' acting career, the events that took place on the evening of March 24th, 2023. We will discuss Robert Downey Jr.'s past, and most importantly, we'll try to come to some sort of an understanding as to why this is happening and what it all means. But before we start, I just need to pop in a very quick disclaimer to say that this video contains topics of domestic violence and substance abuse. So without further ado, let's get into it. So Jonathan Michael Majors was born on the 7th of September 1989 in Lompoc, California, to Terry Nee Anderson and Winfred Majors. He's one of three children. He has an older sister and a younger brother. He had a very difficult childhood. There was a lot of instability in his life. His father was enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, so they lived in Vandenberg Air Force Base, now called Vandenberg Space Force, until Jonathan was about 5 years old. Then they relocated to Cedar Hill, Texas. And from what I understand about his father is he was a very emotionally volatile man. Jonathan doesn't really say anything that is negative about his father, but he was in and out of their lives quite a lot. And one day his father just completely disappeared and he had abandoned his family. Jonathan has spoken about this before he was even accused of anything, and has said that the sense of disappointment that he felt when his father left him had a very huge impact on him as a young man. His father's disappearance also added a lot of financial strain to the family, and his mother now found herself in a position where she had to be the sole provider of the family. So they frequently got evicted, and they basically just wore secondhand clothes and were basically just living from check to check. But she did get some support from her father and her brother, who basically stepped in as the surrogate fathers for her children. Jonathan was also teased a lot by other kids, usually about his facial features. He had a really big nose and a big mouth, and this was often used against him. And because of his emotional volatility, he took a lot of offense to this and often responded by being violent with the people that teased him. So he was always either in juvenile detention, being expelled, or being suspended. It's next to impossible to actually get like a proper timeline of the schools that he went to. I just know that he graduated from Duncanville High School in 2008, and he was a seriously troubled young man. And to add to this, he also hung out with a gang. He said that these guys were his really close friends, and he spoke about this in an interview with Sway. And he'd be like, these guys would just call him and be like, "Hey, shit's popping," and he'd be like, "Okay, cool, where are we going?" His mom would actually go on to obtain a master's degree and become a pastor, and she also got remarried to a man that was freshly out of prison. So this man, Joe Young, had a really good relationship with Jonathan and his siblings. He really stepped in as a father figure, and they had a lot of respect for him. They actually referred to him as Mighty Joe Young. Joe had been in prison for 15 years, and prior to that, he had a very promising future. So Joe had actually tried for the Dallas Cowboys and actually made it to the second to last round. But that was all very much in the past. When he married into Jonathan's family, the situation didn't improve much. Jonathan told the Root magazine that the ankle monitor situation, the PO, like I was that kid trying to make sure dad got home on time before the parole officer got to the crib. And I watched it. I watched that happen. So Jonathan was also a really skilled athlete, but he'd find himself being really drawn to what the coaches were doing to really try and pull people in when they were making their speeches. He found that really fascinating. And he also came from a family of very expressive storytellers. And apparently, there are a lot of pastors in his family. And of course, he enjoyed reading books. He spent a lot of time getting lost in his imagination, and this was a way for him to escape his reality. He spent a lot of time in school suspension, and he was basically put in a little cubicle. And one day he had a book called Top Dog Underdog, and he thought the book was really cool. So he memorized the whole book. And this would be the moment that formed the foundations of his acting career. So one day, 14-year-old Jonathan shoplifts at Kohl's. Apparently, this was for his family's Christmas gifts, and he got into a lot of trouble for this. The school put him on an alternative program, and one of his teachers, Mr. Anderson, had to sit down with him and be like, you know what, this is enough. You can't carry on like this. And Jonathan remembers this being a really pivotal moment in his life. So he introduced him to an acting coach, and from there he was auditioning and really became popular as a drama student. He was introduced to a few more acting coaches, and apparently there was a couple called the Williamses, and they decided that he needed to go into an acting institution. He was put through the Texas Forensic Association, and the Williams couple really pushed for his new hobby to turn into his career. However, Jonathan would find himself getting into trouble again. At 17, he got into a really big domestic with his parents. There are rumors about him having been in a fight with a classmate, and others say that he even got into a fight with a teacher. He hasn't really spoken about the details of what happened that day. But either way, this infuriated his parents, and his stepfather, actually asked him to leave. They had had enough of him, and Jonathan Majors found himself sleeping in his Oldsmobile. So Jonathan got a job working at the local Starbucks, and he would spend his spare time sitting in his car reading. And he'd have these kind of intense visualizations where he would see himself as a huge Hollywood superstar. And they were so intense that he even told himself that the reason why he was living in his car, it was basically him practicing for the life that he would eventually have in the future. Him living in a suitcase and basically just traveling and being on the road a
I
lot.
hear this. It was just a little voice, you know. Um, I remember saying like, "It's gonna be all right, bro,
Oh,
and you're gonna make it." And I mean, it's kind of wild. You know what I mean? Like you're gonna be okay, and this is it. You know, this acting thing is it. You know, and it's the same voice that's kind of been with me uh, this whole time, and I'm just kind of grabbed.
So he lived in his car for about a year. And in 2008, he graduated from high school. And at that point, he had fully immersed himself into being an actor. So he moved back into his parents and he told them that he was really serious about being an actor. And his mom actually took out a loan for him. And he had like tongue tie, so he got that clipped. And that was the beginning of Jonathan Majors. So he enrolled into the University of North Carolina School of Arts and he absolutely smashed it. He was involved in some pretty good productions and he earned his bachelor's degree in 2012. Then at 22, he had a baby girl with a woman that is unknown. And it sounds like their pregnancy was unplanned because this put him in a really weird space mentally. He knew that he definitely don't want to bring a child into this world that would grow up with the same issues that he had dealt with as a child. So he needed to turn things up a notch. There was no more time for messing around. And then 3 months after the birth of his daughter, he started working towards obtaining his master's degree at the Yale School of Drama. And he was known as a guy that didn't really hang out much. Like, he had a really serious manner. But again, he absolutely smashed it. He was known for being really good at what he did, and he graduated in 2016. So we were officially introduced to Jonathan in 2017. He appeared in the TV miniseries When We Rise, which is available on Disney, and this was actually shot while he was still in Yale. This is a film about the gay rights movement following the 1969 Stonewall riots. He was cast as Ken Jones, a gay naval officer who returns home from Vietnam to face both racism and homophobia. And this miniseries did well in terms of ratings. That same year, he had a supporting role in Hostiles, a western set during the late 19th century, where he portrayed a soldier escorting a dying Cayenne. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that right, but it was a Cayenne chief to his home in Montana. This was also very well received. In 2018, he played a role as a substance dealer in White Boy Rick, a crime thriller starring Matthew McConaughey, which is actually based on a true story about a teenager who was a dealer from Detroit, who became one of the youngest FBI informants in history. This had really mixed reviews from critics. And he was also in a crime drama called Out of the Blue, which didn't really do well. It scored like 38 Rotten Tomatoes. In 2019, he appeared in a few films such as Captive State, Jungle Land, and Gully. But this was considered to be his breakout year because of his role in the critically acclaimed film The Last Black Man in San Francisco, where he played Montgomery Mont Allen, a playwright dealing with both gang violence and gentrification in a rapidly changing city. This was so well received that he got a phone call from Spike Lee, who wanted to personally congratulate him on his performance and talk to him about another project that he was working on. This is when he landed the role of David in the movie The Five Bloods, where he acted alongside Delroy Lindo, Chadwick Boseman, and Clark Peters, just to name a few. This movie was released in 2020 and scored 92 Rotten Tomatoes. Jonathan landed that role without even needing to audition. Round about this time, we had the COVID pandemic, and Jonathan was very heavily involved in the Black Lives Matters movement. He didn't have any social media, never has had any social media actually, but he was very involved in the protests and spoke about it in interviews. And then Jonathan told People magazine in June that he and his father had actually reconnected during the racially focused protests following the unaliving of George Floyd. And then in 2020, he took on the role of Atticus Freeman on the HBO miniseries Lovecraft Country, and this was brilliant. If you don't know, this is a supernatural take on the struggles of Black Americans under Jim Crow in the 1950s. And this show was really successful, but it only had one season. On June 2, 2021, HBO announced that the series would not be returning for a second season. In James Andrew Miller's book, Tinderbox, HBO's Ruthless Pursuit of New Frontiers, several writers in the show claimed it had been cancelled allegedly due to Misha Green, the writer and producer, who apparently created a very hostile work environment. But there are also some people who say that HBO just cut the show because they didn't want to meet the budget for the next season. In 2021, he plays an outlaw, Nat Love, in the Netflix black western film The Harder They Fall, where his co-stars included Regina King and Idris Elba. And then things got a little bit more interesting that year because we started hearing rumors of him joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And there he was in the penultimate episode of Loki Season 1. He portrays the eccentric villain, He Who Remains. Then it was pretty clear that not only is this guy not a supporting actor anymore, like he's playing all the lead roles, but he's working his way into the A-list. In 2022, he starred in Devotion, which is an action drama about the war hero Jesse L. Brown, who was the first black pilot in the US Navy. In this film, Jonathan is highly praised for being able to captivate viewers in his portrayal of Jesse, who was an incredible human being but had a lot of emotional struggles along the way, and he credits this to his military family.
Well, we both sat down and watched it last night. We just watched it from different locations. You went downtown at the Regal. I was at a different location a little further downtown last night, and our guest was actually there to do a Q&A after the screening. I go out, I left the screening to go get my coat, and I just happened to run into him coming out of the room on his way to the Q&A. So it was so, mind you, I had tears still like rolling down my face from the end of the film, and so I go up to him not expecting to see him come out of this room. So I'm like, oh shit, Jesse, oh wait, that's not your name. Your name's Jonathan. So it was just super like kind of awkward for me anyway, but I didn't get a chance to tell you last night when I saw you because I was just so kind of caught off guard. But I wanted to look you in your face and tell you that you did a fucking amazing job with this role, dude. I mean, playing Jesse, you didn't even get a chance to meet him, and you could only guess what he was feeling in certain moments in the film, and it was an amazing film. You are going to win an award. If it's not for this, you are going to win Oscars, Golden Globes, everything. I'm just telling you that right now, and I want that on the tape so that when it happens, we can go back and be like, see, DB told you. I'm telling you, you are that good on screen, and I love watching you, whether it's Kang and Loki, whether it's Jesse in this film, whatever the role is, like Sway said. Like, I am drawn to watching you, the Five Bloods, you know what I mean? Like, it is
Five Bloods, oh my God.
The work you've been doing since we had you on the show last time is amazing, and so I don't want to take up any more time with this intro. I just wanted to give you your flowers while you're...
That same year, Jonathan surprised everyone when he showed up at the San Diego Comic-Con. And this is where he announced what was probably his biggest role to date. Jonathan was set to play the new big baddie in the MCU. And he was set to be in the upcoming 5th Avengers film that would be based around his character. In Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, he portrays Kang the Conqueror, who is a variant of He Who Remains from the Loki series. If you don't know what I'm talking about and haven't watched it, I will explain this to you later in this video. But anyway, he was set to be in the 5th upcoming Avengers film, which would be based around his whole character. This was set to be named The Avengers: The Kang Dynasty. In 2023, he plays Damien, Diamond Dame Anderson in Creed 3, a boxing drama that is part of the Rocky franchise. And again, he is credited for really, really being able to breathe life into the characters. Like you actually believe him when he's on screen. And when he's asked about how he managed to pull off this character, who was someone that was freshly released from prison, Jonathan said that he'd kept Joe, his stepfather, in mind when developing a character because he witnessed someone who had been stopped in their greatness early on. And the movie was directed by Michael B. Jordan, who also played the lead character, and it was a critical and commercial hit. At this point, I remember thinking to myself, this guy is a machine. He is everywhere. And this sort of thing doesn't happen very often, especially with people of color in Hollywood. So everyone was genuinely excited for him. He was unapologetically being a brilliant actor. And just when we thought, cool, he's pushing the envelope, things can't get any better for this guy. And then the Sundance Film Festival happened between the 19th to the 29th of January, and a film that Jonathan's going to be starring in called Magazine Dreams was screened. And according to the people there, Jonathan absolutely shines as the main character of the film. Magazine Dreams is about an amateur bodybuilder who has some really deep issues. He struggles to find human connection in his exploration of celebrity. And there are a lot of interesting themes, some I don't think that I can even mention on YouTube, so I'm going to leave it there. But one reviewer wrote, "Wow, saw this at Sundance. Honestly, had no idea what this was going in. This was intense. Jonathan Majors is great. No surprise there. He is totally believable as Killen, a probably somewhat developmentally disabled amateur bodybuilder competitor. It ranges from cringeworthy to edge of your seat to weird to shocking to horrifying. Such an amazing performance. The cinematography was claustrophobic and off-putting, and the music was often jarring, with dramatic shifts that mirror Killian's mental state." So Jonathan was the it guy. I mean, I don't know if people actually still use that phrase, but he was hotter than a mother. He was so hot that he was asked to be the face of the US Army's new recruitment campaign, where he was featured in a few adverts that aimed to rebrand the Army to appeal to Gen Zs. The Army hoped his popularity would help them reach young audiences. The US Army said that he was chosen because he fit the campaign's creative brief, which called for someone who could be a mentor to young adults. These ads were met with so much praise. Like, everywhere he went, everything that he did, people just absolutely loved him. He was a proper rags to riches story. And no matter how successful he became, Jonathan always felt like there was something inside of him that would not let him be happy. He was very much aware that he was now seen as a high-profile celebrity, but first and foremost, he was a black man. And he'd been exposed to so much racism, going back to his days when he still lived in Cedar Hill. And he felt like no matter how big his celebrity status got, he would still have a target on his back. And he wanted us all to have a bigger conversation about that, what it meant. And he'd just rock up to interviews and make it a point to speak about racial discrimination.
Of it, for me, felt greater. And there were a great deal of times when I quote unquote went left. You know what I mean?
Did it feel like the system was stacked up against you when you were a kid? Did you feel like you were like,
well, I got news for you. The system's still stacked up against me.
Yeah.
If you take the posters down,
you're just going to a store, going to a gas station. The system's not room for you.
It's not pro. It's not. No. Yeah, it doesn't got my back at all. And just sort me out and say you're this now. That's when the conflict came in, and it came in strong.
Meaning what? Meaning, are you talking about typecasting based on your looks, your appearance, your build, like that kind of thing?
I mean, you call it typecasting. I call it profiling. You know what I mean?
You're right. Of course.
Being profiled, as a young black man in Texas, that had power, had emotional power, had intellectual power, all these things I began to get pushed in certain places, and the first place I was redlined was academics. You know what I mean? I wasn't allowed in the gifted and talented courses. I got around that. There's some Damien. I forged my mom's signature and then put me in that. Forged it again 2 years later, put me in the AP courses. Right. You know what I mean? So
no, this isn't for you. This you don't.
Exactly.
This isn't.
Exactly.
You don't.
And then even actually, something else my friends would probably say. He's quite frustrated. I'm very frustrated. That's very true about me. I'm in a constant state of frustration.
Is it frustrated with your own stuff or external stuff or everything? What are we talking about?
External and internal. Of course, because I'm projecting the world as I feel it inside. Sure. So there's about 40%, 30% is a high level of frustration. I say it to say that one of my objectives is to be understood, right? And so it is through that frustration that fuels that need to be understood. And so the more work we make, right, and the more diverse it is, potentially the more I could be understood, right? Because if you only statues, no one knows you or can understand you through watercolor, right? That's what I felt was wrong with that kid at the end of the table that I was, with the hoodie and the pants and the this and the that, and by his lonesome, he was frustrated and sad, and because he couldn't be understood.
The filming of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania took place over several locations, and they filmed over a few months in 2021. But between July and November that year, they were situated in England. And this is where Jonathan met Grace Jabari. Grace was born in Reading, England. She is of British and Kurdish heritage and is generally known for being a dancer and a movement coach. She trained at Tring Park School for Performing Arts, which is a really expensive school, but she says that she got in there through a scholarship. And she graduated with a first-class BA from Rambert School and a first-class MA from Northern School of Contemporary Dance. On graduating, she toured Dracula with the Mark Bruce Company and later played Calypso in the UK tour of the Odyssey. Other performance works include Vestige by Wayne Parsons Dance, live studios for artists Florence and the Machine, Damien Rice, Neem, FKA Spankrock. She also featured as a dancer in movies such as Barbie, Mission Impossible, and Coldplay's music video Cry, Cry, Cry. She's still in the beginning stages of her career, but she's got a very extensive portfolio. She was employed as a movement coach in the Ant-Man film, which is someone who works with the actors and other performers to impart tools for connecting physical movement to emotional, musical, and theatrical expression. So they met on the set. And one day, Jonathan's hairstylist slips Grace a note, and she opens it, and it's got Jonathan's number on it. And later, that same day, Jonathan was like, "Am I going to see you again later?" And she was like, yes. So she texts him, and they meet up after work. And they basically got into a whirlwind romance. And it's not clear exactly when the relationship started, but it was between August and September 2021. So they're together pretty much every day. Grace says that not long after that, she sold her flat in England and she moved in with him in a luxurious house in Hampstead, England. Jonathan would write her poems very frequently, and he told her that he loved her very early in the relationship, and Grace says that she absolutely loved that. She found it overwhelming, but she thought it was nice. But the honeymoon period did not last very long. It would become apparent that the couple didn't share the same values. Grace was very outgoing. She loved to be social. She had a big group of friends. And Jonathan was on the complete opposite end of that scale. He was very serious. He very introverted. He didn't really do much outside of work besides reading, hanging out with his daughter, and bulking up some more for his work. Which leads us to March the 24th, 2023. The couple went out that night. They watched a play called The Sign in Sydney Brewston's Window, which was shown at the Brooklyn Academy of Music. And after that, they went out for dinner to a Japanese restaurant called Karasu. They had a great night, but Grace apparently did notice that at some point Jonathan's mood changed a bit. So after dinner, they were on their way home. They were in a privately rented vehicle, and Grace is sort of resting her head on Jonathan's shoulder while Jonathan is sort of going through his phone. And then a message comes through, and it is in response to a link of a song that Jonathan had sent to someone called Cleopatra. And Cleopatra's response was, "Oh, I wish I was kissing you right now." So Grace is like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, no, it's nothing." And she's like, "Well, then show me if it's nothing." So then the couple get into a tussle for the phone. Jonathan tries to explain the situation to Grace, but Grace just wants to see the text, and there is apparently a tussle for it. Then Jonathan asks the driver to stop. The car stops. He gets out. At this point, he doesn't even care anymore. He just wants to leave Grace alone. Grace jumps out of the car with him, and she is pulling him, and he does what is probably the thing that he would regret more than anything in his entire life at this moment. While Grace is pulling him, he picks her up and shoves her back into the car. But Grace is on him. She is on him, and at this point, he tries to shove her back in the car. He eventually manages to get away. As he steps on the pavement, he realizes that Grace is still behind him, and she pulls his arm again. and he untangles himself, and he does what is probably a moment that will live in our minds for the rest of our lives. Jonathan runs and runs and runs, and Grace is right behind him. She even almost gets hit by a car. She doesn't care about anything at this point, and then she eventually loses him and comes across a couple of strangers, and they are later joined by a woman. Amongst these three strangers is a woman called Chloe Zola and Max Manning, who will be important as the story goes along. And then she tells them that she basically, like, she is really lost. She needs help. She doesn't have her phone. She doesn't have her wallet. She needs help. And they say, okay, cool, we're going to help you. And they're trying to calm her down. These three tell Grace that they are going to take care of her. But as she's standing and talking to them, Jonathan walks past, and she says to him that she needs her bag, she needs her wallet, and Jonathan doesn't even want to hear anything from her at this point. He's very upset. His body language says it all, and he just walks away, and she follows him. Again, the car driver looks for them, finds them around that corner, and they get into the car. They spend more time in the car. Chloe and the two guys are, kudos to them, but they are right there waiting for something to happen. They are quite intent on trying to help the situation. So they stand there and wait, and eventually I think Jonathan gets out of the car and he just walks away. He walks away from the situation, and Grace comes out of the car, follows Jonathan again, and at some point they are able to finally convince Grace, like, leave him alone. So Jonathan goes, he checks himself into a hotel, and he spends the night. He said that he had booked 2 nights to stay in that hotel. So Grace goes out with her new friends, and they go to a nightclub called Lucy's, and she tries to reach out to Jonathan a few times throughout the evening. They do communicate at some point and kind of make their breakup official, and then Grace kind of threatens to unalive herself, allegedly. And the next day, Jonathan goes back to his apartment because they're broken up. He thinks that Grace isn't in the building anymore. He thinks she's left. So he goes back, and Grace is still there. Her bag, there's clearly bags that are still, there that belong to her. So he goes into the room. He finds pills next to the bed, and he finds a lot of sick on the bed. And he goes to the room that Grace is in, and it's locked. So he tries to get in, tries to bang on the door. There's no response, and he thinks the worst. So he goes and he asks for help from the janitor, and they do give him access to the room. So he goes inside the room by himself, which whether it's the closet or bathroom at this point, it is unclear. So he goes into that room and he finds Grace laying on the floor, half naked, passed out. He tries to wake her up. She doesn't respond. So then he calls 911.
New York City 911, you need police, fire, medical.
Hey, is it medical?
No,
suicide, I think.
What is the location?
252 7th Avenue.
All right, so that was 252 7th Avenue, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
What apartment?
Penthouse D.
Penthouse D?
Yes.
As in David, right?
Yes,
This is in Manhattan or in Brooklyn?
This is.
Hello, sir?
Yes, ma'am. This is in
You're
Manhattan.
losing service. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, it's okay. It's in Manhattan.
All right. So this is Penthouse D. Just stay on the line, all right?
Okay, we'll do.
Penthouse D as in David. Don't worry about it. Speaking to me is not delaying anything. I just need some help, some information for the crew. They're already on the way, okay?
Okay.
Attempted suicide. Let me get them going. What happened exactly? Do you know?
No, I don't know. But she's unconscious. She's naked from the bottom down. She has a sweatshirt on. She's my ex-partner. We broke up. I came back. She sent me text messages insinuating as much.
I stayed in a hotel last night. I came home this morning. I banged on the door. I've been at the apartment for about 40 minutes now. I banged at the door. I couldn't get in. I finally went downstairs and asked the doorman to help us, and they let me in via the handyman.
All right.
Yeah. She's 30 years old, white, female.
All right. Does she suffer from anything prior to? Or no, she have a mental condition or history?
I would maybe say so.
Right.
She has a history with...
What's her name?
Her name is Grace Caitlin Natasha Jabari.
Grace. All right. Do you know what she did or what she took, or you don't know?
No, I don't know. I just know she's unconscious.
All right. No problem, sir.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get you over to the EMS. Do not hang up, all right? They're already en route, okay?
Okay.
All right. Stay on the line. Hold on. Arrow?
639.
639. I'm 2880 for the job number 1749.
Hello, caller.
Hey, how are you?
Hi, this is 252 7th Avenue in Manhattan.
Yes, sir. Right over the Whole Foods.
Okay. And the patient's breathing?
Oh, yes, sir. She is.
Okay, is she awake?
No.
And phone number for you, 214-601-9547.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
This is Penthouse Diaz and David.
Yes, sir. Penthouse Diaz and David.
Okay, you're with her right now?
I've come downstairs to let the lobbymen know that you guys are on their way. So
they're going to be there as soon as possible.
Okay.
Obviously, if you could just
What should I do? What should I do?
If you could just make sure the door's open, and when you get upstairs, she didn't fall and hit her head, anything that you know of, right?
No, I think I saw a cut behind her ear.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old is she?
She's 30 years old.
Okay. So if you could just, when you get back upstairs, we just want you to keep an eye on her breathing. If she wakes up, we don't want to give her anything to eat or drink. Like I said, they're already responding.
I think they just walked in.
The ambulance crew?
Okay. I think this is the ambulance crew.
Is it the fire department?
I called them on with a test. I got a drug.
I think that's PD.
Yeah.
That's the police, sir.
Hello, sir. That's the police?
I don't know what's going on. She's conscious, though. She tried to. Yeah. So will you just keep that confidential? Fella, this way.
Sir, you're speaking to the cops?
Yeah, I'm assuming this is either our guys. I mean.
Is it the police?
Girlfriend. I just came back home. Girlfriend.
Probably. Let me see if they're at the location. Sorry.
I'm leaving. I just need you to phone me and say goodbye, Jonathan. There's no note. Just knowing what happened. Where this way? This way? Yeah. I finally got into the apartment. The apartment was open.
Yeah, they're at low. The sergeant is at the location.
Okay, and just to confirm again, you 252 7th Avenue, Penthouse D, between 124th and 125th in Manhattan?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, no problem.
So the police get there and Grace regains her consciousness and she is very confused and she has visible injuries. So she's got a laceration on behind her ear. One of her fingers is very badly bruised and it's fractured and swollen. She's got redness and all marks on her face and her neck. And when she gets up, she seems extremely confused. And when they ask her what happened, she said that she doesn't know. So the police put two and two together and asked Jonathan to leave the room. There are some people talking to Jonathan, trying to figure out what's happened. There are some people who are with Grace in the room trying to give her medical attention, make sure that, you know, she doesn't need any urgent medical attention, and sort of also trying to get some answers from her, but she says she doesn't know anything. And then I'm assuming, based on their training in situations like this, the police decide that they are going to arrest Jonathan. So Grace is taken to the hospital and is still saying that she doesn't know what happened. And the news breaks out that Jonathan has been arrested for domestic violence. And I remember seeing this. I remember just thinking, what the hell? He had literally just started his career. How could he ruin something like this? So Jonathan was released within a day, and a temporary restraining order was put against him. And the next day, charges were filed against him. He had 3 counts of third-degree assault, 1 count of second-degree harassment, and 1 count of aggravated harassment. Then Jonathan and his legal team pretty much go into damage control. And by damage control, I mean let's screw over Grace, like right now. Let's take her down. They came out and they said Jonathan is completely innocent. And not only is he innocent in this whole thing, he was actually the victim of it all. They say that Jonathan called the police because he was worried about Grace and her mental condition, and they confirm that they've actually got a bunch of evidence to prove this. So they sent the following text to TMZ. So this is from Grace. Please let me know you're okay when you get this. They assured me that you wouldn't be charged. They said that they had to arrest you as protocol when they saw the injuries on me and they knew we had a fight. I'm so angry that they did, and I'm sorry that you're in this position. I'll make sure that nothing happens about this. I told them it was my fault for trying to grab your phone. I only just got out of hospital. Just call me when you're out. I love you. They just called me again to check on me, and I reiterated how this was not an attack and they do not have my blessing on any charges being placed. I read the paper they gave me about strangulation, and I said point blank this did not occur and should be removed immediately. The judge is definitely going to be told this. She ensured this to me. I know you have the best team and there's nothing to worry about. I just want you to know that I'm doing all I can on my end. I also said to tell the judge to know that the origin of the call was to do with me collapsing and passing out, and your worry as my partner due to our communication prior. Out of care, she promised me all will be relayed. So when all of this came out and Jonathan's team started doing all these things against Grace, she was like, okay, I'm not going to play nice anymore. And Grace was now fully compliant with the case against Jonathan. So releasing these texts turned out to be a huge mistake from Jonathan's team's part, because it actually made Grace look like she was a victim of DV because of the one sentence over here saying that I told them that it was my fault for trying to grab your phone. This is the typical language that someone uses when they are a victim of violence and abuse. This just made her sound like she was saying that she actually asked to get hit. So Jonathan's lawyers submitted a motion to dismiss the charges, basically saying that this is going to be a huge waste. This person hasn't done anything, and we have got evidence. Look over here, we've got proof that he's done nothing wrong. And I believe that he had to make a court appearance on Zoom, and the court denied this motion. They said that, there seems to be proof that this absolutely needs to go to court. Deadline reported that a New York judge has ruled that actor Jonathan Majors must face trial on domestic abuse charges. In a hearing Wednesday, New York Supreme Court Judge Michael Gaffey denied a defense motion to dismiss the case and set a start date of November 29 for the trial. Gaffey also revealed that the defense had filed a new motion under seal that seeks to keep details related to an undisclosed evidentiary matter shielded from public view. Defense attorney Seth Zuckerman, asked by Gaffey if there was any alternative to the secretive route, said the defense team had considered other ways, but the answer is simply no. Due to the high profile of the case, he continued, not shielding that aspect of the case would lead to such an intense media scrutiny, and it would compromise its client's right to a fair trial. Then on the 22nd of June, Jonathan goes to the police station and he files his own charges against Grace, stating that when Grace saw the text message appear on his phone, she attacked him. She scratched, slapped, and grabbed at his face, and that's why he felt like he needed to remove himself from the situation. And get this part, allegedly, it wasn't the first time that this happened. She had been physically violent with him before. So he brings in the evidence, and apparently the other incident that took place was in London, and apparently this happened in the infamous month of September 2022. Like, this wasn't a great month for the couple. But Jonathan further accuses Grace of running up his credit card without his authorization, returning to London with his iPhone and a Rolex vintage watch and other luxury items that cost between $6,000 and $7,000. The NYPD looked into this and they found probable cause to arrest. Officer Meagan, who was the person who was doing the investigation, requested for a warrant to arrest Grace, who was currently in the UK. But this was reduced to an I-card. This is just a document that directs police to take Grace into custody, at least for questioning. And the DA pushed back very heavily on this. And then the Business Insider reported that Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Erin Tierney said that they will not prosecute any charges that the NYPD brings against Grace. The prosecutor has acknowledged that she has struck an informal agreement with Grace to have her testify against Jonathan Majors at the trial. And then Grace turned herself in on the 25th of October and all the charges against her were dropped. So Jonathan had to wait to face his charges in court on November 29th. But things got worse for him. Then something else was raised by the Twitter community. February 2023, there was a tweet that was posted by filmmaker A.B. Allen, and it read like this. There's a particular actor relatively new on the scene who Twitter has violently fallen head over heels for, who in actuality is a vicious, cruel, abusive human being, both professionally and in his personal life. And every new viral thirst tweet about him drives me insane. Twitter went mad. Everyone was trying to guess who the hell he was talking about. And then when all this stuff started coming out about Jonathan Majors, someone copied a link and posted it. I mean, this tweet had actually been deleted, but that's how crazy Twitter is. Someone still had a screenshot of it. They put a link of the Jonathan Majors article, and A.B. Allen said, ding, 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 ding. And then the Society Theatre co-founder and Broadway director Tim Nicola came out with the following post when the allegations started coming out. I'm just going to say this about Jonathan and be done with it. Folks at Yale and the broader NYC community have known about him for years. He's a psychopath and abuser, and that is how virtually everyone speaks about him. It's a shame it took this long for him to be reported. Jonathan's whole world was falling apart. And then on the 29th of June 2023, Rolling Stone magazine came out with a scathing article about Jonathan Majors that took 3 months worth of investigation and interviews from the people who have worked with Jonathan and the people who have known him personally. Apparently over 40 people were interviewed, and they described him as someone who was very unpleasant to be around or to work with. The allegations actually state that on the set of Magazine Dreams, Jonathan was extremely rude to everyone and acted violently against the cast and the crew. Furthermore, 3 girls that he had dated said that he had been verbally abusive as a partner. So Rolling Stone did reach out to Jonathan's team to ask if they wanted to respond to these claims, and they fired back with 6 character witnesses from his ex-partners that showed him in a good light. And then Rolling Stone said that they didn't report on these statements because 3 of the 6 had apparently not given their consent. And then Haley Carter, who dated Jonathan for about 5 years, came through and she stood up for Jonathan. She said, after 20 years of knowing him, I can tell you who Jonathan is. He did not do these things. He is exactly the opposite of what these allegations say. Jonathan is the most self-controlled, self-disciplined, well-mannered person I know. We all call him the peacekeeper. He isn't violent in any way. Jonathan and his team came out with a statement to IndieWire saying the following. Jonathan Majors vehemently denies Rolling Stone's false allegations that he physically, verbally, or emotionally abused anyone, let alone any of his past romantic partners. The allegations that Mr. Majors got physical with or physically intimidated anyone on any movie set are downright false. Everyone who has worked with Mr. Majors knows that he employs an immersive method acting style. So let's talk about method acting, because this word pops up a lot. Method acting, also known as the art of experiencing, is a style of acting where a person takes on a role and they fully immerse themselves into that character. They don't break from it, even if the camera stops rolling. And they do this in the hopes of portraying a sincere and expressive performance through their being able to identify with, understanding, and experiencing a character's inner motivations and emotions. So there's been some pretty brilliant work that has come out from method acting. Like, we've seen a lot of people from Hollywood who've done this. And Jonathan Majors is a method actor. He has studied it and has been practicing it throughout his career. So he's spoken about an experience when he went to watch Batman, The Dark Knight, that was released in 2008, starring Heath Ledger as the Joker. Jonathan watched this, and basically watching Heath Ledger changed his life. He knew from watching him that he wanted to be an actor. And Heath was one of the most famous method actors. Heath Ledger's diary that he wrote on while he was filming the movie has now been released. And I was shocked. Even when he's sitting alone in a room, the thoughts that he would put in his diaries, he was still in character. It never stopped. I'm not going to really repeat some of the things that I saw in there, but I will, if you haven't seen it, I will include a link in the description so you can go and check it out yourselves. So anyway, this is what Jonathan's team was claiming. And when he was on set, he would become the character. And when he was filming Magazine Dreams, apparently the cast and crew were also warned by the producers. They were asked if they could please stay away from Jonathan because they were aware that this is happening. Like, he was still expected to stay in character outside of filming. And if Jonathan interacted with people, he wouldn't be interacting with them as Jonathan. He would be interacting with them as, I think it's Kierlan, the bodybuilder. So don't get me wrong. I am not saying that this is an excuse for anybody to be abusive towards anyone. There is no excuse for that. What I am saying is that when you're working with a method actor, you do need to be fully aware of the fact that things like this are going on. And, a lot of method actors have actually spoken about the psychological toll that this form of acting takes on them. I think a lot of people have said that the worst part of doing this is trying to break out of the character once filming has even ended. And it sounds horrific. I don't know why anyone still does it, but they do. And it's been rumored to actually have contributed very significantly towards the depression that Heath Ledger was struggling with when he sadly passed away. And Shia LaBeouf, he's gone. I don't think he even recognizes himself when he looks in the mirror anymore. So, while we're waiting for the trial to start, something really interesting happened with Jonathan Majors. We saw him getting out of a flight with a Miss Meagan Good. So, if you don't know who Meagan Good is, she is an American actress / model who has been doing this since she was about 4 years old. Her career really took off when she was in her teens. She was in shows such as Moesha, Cousin Skeeter, and My Wife and Kids. She's really well known for being quite versatile as an actress. She's appeared in comedies such as Anchorman 2. Well, she didn't appear, she was actually the leading lady. She can do a good drama as well, like Forever. She can also do a good thriller such as The Intruder. Like, she's a very versatile actress. She's had a very clean reputation throughout her career, and I follow her on social media, and I don't think that I've actually even really seen her kind of going out and drinking. It's always even if she is out doing stuff in public, it's always like paid promotions and things like that. And she was married to a pastor for 9 years, Devon Franklin, She's kept her head down and worked most of her life. One thing about Meagan that is really hard to miss is that she is absolutely stunning. She's known for being one of the most beautiful people in Hollywood. And it seems like she's just an overall really nice person. She's quite a philanthropist. She's done work for Souls for Souls, Children's Defense Fund, and the Greater Good Foundation, which she founded with her sister. She's always sharing things on social media to kind of raise awareness to social injustice issues. And anything really to do with empowering communities, she is there. So she seems like she's the perfect human being. She's driven, she's got a good work ethic, she's got a good heart. And then you top that all up with being one of the most desirable people in Hollywood. However, her marriage was not doing very well. Meagan and Devon had always struggled with the ideas of what a pastor's wife should be, the way that she dresses and the way that she carries herself. She was a Hollywood star and was very comfortable with her femininity, but she was constantly being criticized for that, and mainly by Devon's followers.
At the grocery store, and I looked at a newsstand, and I saw you, and you had your breast shown. Okay, so we're going to cover up, right?
And for the most part, I have to say that Devon did stick up for her and protect her.
Wait a minute. No. No. That is not what we're here for. She's not going to cover up. She's going to wear what she want to wear in the name of Jesus. She has been as Christian as she has been, that she is right now, when she's worn whatever God wants she wanted to wear. So, we ain't doing that.
So to me, it wasn't really a shock when they announced their separation. In fact, Devon actually filed for divorce. And I think that he did that because he cared for her more than he cared for himself. And Meagan also, she did not want to be divorced, clearly from the things that she's going around saying right now in the media. But I think that ultimately the couple had to do this because they were incompatible. But after this, Meagan was really able to kind of be whatever she wanted to be. And she really turned up her game. I mean, like, she went from being like all nice, beautiful Hollywood celebrity to being like sex bomb, like crazy sex bomb. And now she's actually referred to Miss Good if you're nasty. So these pictures of her and Jonathan came out, and I'm pretty sure that it was less than a year since her and Devon had been divorced. So everything was like, not Miss Good rocking up with a guy who may be going to prison in a few months. A guy that's being accused of DV. But not long after that, they were again photographed having dinner with Meagan's mother and sister, and Jonathan had bought flowers for everyone. And we pretty much just started seeing them together everywhere. So this was boiled down to being a publicity stunt. You see, Jonathan has been accused of not particularly being attracted to black women. I mean, I don't know. He's been very private about his life, but there's no record of him having been with a woman of color. There's no record of him having not been with a woman of color either. It's a tricky one. But for me, the thing is, on paper, him and Meagan, they are perfect for each other. And that may be the problem, that on paper they are perfect for each other. They are both very religious. They are both very driven in their careers. They both take care of themselves pretty well physically. I mean, they just look really good together as well. They would be like the ultimate power couple. If this whole thing is real, they would be perfect for the long term. I'm looking forward to hopefully one day seeing little Jonathan and Meagan babies. But he's been accused of trying to win over black people by dating Meagan. And apparently that's the thing. When all else fails, you just kind of fall back on the black vote. And another thing is that Meagan is an older woman. She's 43, making her 8 years older than him. I mean, it seems kind of strange that he's dating someone who is the complete opposite of the woman that he was seeing about a year ago. So, going back to the trial, we've got a few things that Jonathan's legal team have put forward as proof of Jonathan's innocence regarding the suspected DV that allegedly took place on the 24th of March. So we've got apparently text messages that his legal team released to TMZ, and those text messages are, again, not exonerative in any way. Grace does not clearly state that those injuries were not as a result of Jonathan's aggression during the altercation. And then we've got the driver of the rented vehicle, and Jonathan's team were pretty sure that he was going to testify that Jonathan was trying to get away from Grace that night. And there is also evidence that Grace went out that night and she did not appear to be injured at all. And then finally, his lawyers bring up the morning when Jonathan was arrested. The first argument is that Jonathan is the one that called the police when he got to his apartment after hours of him not having seen or spoken to Grace. He got into his apartment and he found her mysteriously passed out on the floor of his apartment. So why would he do that if he knew that he was the one that had put her in that position? And then finally, his lawyers are saying that this whole thing is a result of racism from the police. Apparently, when they got there, the body cam footage shows that Grace said that she apparently didn't know what happened to her about 19 times, but she kept being coached by the people who were around her into saying that Jonathan is the one that had hurt her. Right, so December the 1st, 2023, day one of the state of New York versus Jonathan Majors. So both sides gave their opening statements. And the state basically said that this is a case about a powerful man who wielded his power over a helpless young woman and has been abusive towards her, not only that night, but for a while in their relationship. And the defense's case was apparently going to show that this was a woman who was wielding social and political power in a post-Me Too era, knowing very well that the prejudice would be against a 6-foot-tall black man. The first witness that was called to the stand was Ryan Strict, who was the digital analyst. So basically his role was to compile all of the video evidence and sort of tell a narrative with all of it. So the defense gets into their cross-examination, basically asking Ryan about whether there had been any amends or editing at all to his evidence. And he goes on to say yes. When they ask him to elaborate on this, he says that he would make things easier to watch. That was his job. So he basically did editing so that the average viewer could make sense of the evidence. An example of this is making long videos shorter by speeding them up, amending the sound, focusing on certain points, which he calls relevant points of the night. So he did all that without changing the integrity of the media, apparently. And then he's asked who was basically calling the shots as to what amends were being made. And he says that it was the ADAs, the Assistant District Attorneys. Further to this, he's asked where he got trained to do this. And he says that he got his training from the New York County District Attorney's office. This is all the training that he has from the people who are trying to put Jonathan away. And John's team, they had many objections about the evidence that was being used in the trial because they felt like it had been amended not to show the bits when Grace was acting on anything and cutting out certain parts of the messages and conversations that Jonathan would be having. They would only focus on the parts that would make him look bad. So the defense team said that they were going to get their own digital analyst to put together their own compilation. But a lot of it was disallowed in court and has not been made available for public knowledge or use, especially the parts where Grace is being confrontational, which Jonathan is claiming that she apparently was. And then we have day 2, when the only witness that's called to the stand is Grace. And she's asked questions about their relationship. So she goes into the story of her background and the whirlwind romance. But she goes on to explain that things changed very quickly in their relationship. So about 4 months into the relationship, she went to Atlanta to visit Jonathan. And Jonathan was sort of going through all the things that she needed to do when she met his dogs, because the dogs were protective. So he needed to like tell her what she needed to do so that they don't see her as a threat. Kind of like a health and safety briefing, basically. And then Grace is like, oh, okay, cool. Like, that's really nice. You know, I've never really had any experience with dogs apart from the dog that me and my ex had. So she talks about the dogs, and then she says that she noticed that he was getting like really upset with her. So she stops and he starts talking about like, how dare you like talk about your ex with me, and like, I don't know who her ex was, but he was like, he thinks that it's embarrassing that she even dated him, she must never bring his name up again. And she was just like, okay, cool, whatever. And then Grace says that was like for her the first real thing that showed her that she needed to be a bit more cautious around him. And after that, he just got more and more abusive in their relationship. And the important thing to note over here is that she says that he was never physically abusive towards her, not until March the 24th. But she always knew that she needed to fear him. And this is because of a few things that happened in their relationship. So she went to the Glastonbury Festival in 2022. She said that it was a tradition that her and her friends had been doing for a while. It's just like everybody that she knows is at the Glastonbury Festival. And she knew that there wouldn't be any signal. So she did warn him before going to the event. He was in America because of his work commitments, so he couldn't join her. But that was apparently going to be a busy week for him. She said that the festival, or her stay in the festival, is usually about 5 days. She's there, she's having fun, she's got no signal. Every once in a while, she'll send him a text. And then when people would be asleep at night, she would try and ring him. I'm assuming that she did this because there would maybe be less traffic on the network or something, but she would be able to call him in the middle of the night when everyone's passed out. It was frustrating, Jonathan. Apparently she could tell that he was getting frustrated. And then the thing that tipped him over was when she bumped into one of his friends, and she said, oh, I've been trying to get a hold of him. Let's take a picture and then you can send it to him and just let him know that I'm okay. So the guy, whoever it was that was Jonathan's friend, just takes a picture and he sends it to Jonathan, says, Grace is okay, she's here with me, she said she's been trying to get a hold of you. So she says that this got him upset. He's saying like, listen, I'm having a really busy week. I don't even really have time to do anything, but I'm sitting here, I've been worried about you the whole time. I barely speak to you. Like I should be concentrating on my work right now, but instead I'm getting text messages from other guys and pictures of them with you. Like, you should have known better. And she goes back home and she's tries to call him, but he doesn't pick up his phone. And another incident that took place was when the two were in a heated argument, and Jonathan was apparently working on Magazine Dreams, you know, the time where everyone was calling him a big jerk on set. So he was apparently on a really, really strict diet that he was struggling with, according to Grace. She says that they were arguing and there were some things on a table. So Jonathan just wipes all of those things. Everything hit a wall. And apparently there was a dent on a wall, and she took pictures of it. And then there was another incident when they were living in Hampstead in the luxurious mansion that Jonathan was given by the company while he was filming. So she was pretty much living with him at this point, and then she invited one of her friends to come and see the place. She just wanted to show everyone because she'd never lived in a place that big before. And then her and her friend went out to a pub after that reunion, and then Jonathan was at home with his personal trainer, so outside of work he's still training. Grace comes back eventually with her friend, and they seem a little pissed. So Jonathan gets annoyed by this. Apparently Grace orders some food, and while they're all sitting down and about to eat, she realizes that Jonathan is a bit annoyed by her. So she gives everyone a doggy bag to take home. And the personal trainer and her friend that she just went out to the pub with. And then she went on the phone, was speaking to her mom, because that was apparently right after Queen Elizabeth had died. So she was like laughing with her mom about how they're standing in the queue waiting to see the Queen. And Jonathan got annoyed that she's just on the phone and she keeps giggling and cracking up. And then she hangs up the phone and she goes to sleep. And then the next day she says that she was just going to go do something that was really nice for both of them. She went out to go and get breakfast, and she wanted to just sort of start off a new day with a fresh, clean slate. So she went out and she got breakfast, but when she was walking back, walking through something that was like a park, she came across Jonathan and she was like, "Are you okay now?" And Jonathan was like, "Really? Are you serious? I'm not okay, because you don't seem to get what I'm saying to you. Like, I don't know how else to actually show you what is going on in this relationship." And then she was like, "You know what? I actually don't know what your problem is. So cool." And then as she's walking away, he comes up behind her and he just rips off her headphones that are in her ears. Then Jonathan tells her that she needs to go. She needs to go home, pack her things, and when he returns from work, she needs to be out of the house. So Grace is like, "Okay, that's fine." So then she gets to the house and starts packing, according to Grace. This is Grace's testimony. She gets to the house and starts packing, and she suddenly hears footsteps from someone coming up the stairs. And apparently it's Jonathan. And she starts packing up everything that belongs to her and putting it in bags. And he's not calm at this point. According to Grace, he's angry. And he basically just starts running around, and he's like mad and throwing things around. And then at some point, he throws a coffee cup at the wall. Then there's a lot of arguing, and Grace eventually leaves and she goes to stay at a friend's place. Then Jonathan apparently reaches out to her and apologizes. Again, I need to stress that this is part of Grace's testimony on their relationship. There's no evidence to actually show that this is how the events unfolded. This is what Grace is saying. So anyway, there's a lot of texting, and she comes back a couple of days later, and they have a really deep conversation about all of this, because apparently he's just getting really used to this whole thing of just throwing things at walls when he's upset. So they have a deep conversation about it, and somehow Jonathan ends up being upset again. And she says that she still didn't know what was going on with him. She had no clue why he was so upset. And then she decided that she needed to pull out her phone and record him. And then Jonathan has the conversation with her, the Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King conversation.
Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Do you really know, baby? Do you really?
Yes.
Then how dare you come home drunk and disturb the peace of our house when we have a plan? Grace has to be in a certain mindset to support Coretta Scott King. You know who that is? That's Martin Luther King's wife. Michelle Obama, Barack Obama's wife.
I know I'm not. I shouldn't have gone out. I'm
No,
sorry.
let me just lay it out for you, right? If I'm just gonna say this. My temper, my trauma, blah, all that said, right? And I'm not saying I'm a great man, a great man. The woman that supports me, that I support, that needs to be a great woman and make sacrifices the way that man is making for her and for them ultimately. Could be doing right now. Period. This is actually, period. Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Do you really though, baby? Do you really?
Yes.
Then how dare you come home drunk and disturb the peace of our house when we have a plan? I would like to get to the point where your friends know what job I'm on and go, I think Grace is gonna be out of commission. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I won't.
No. Do you understand that? Because that team, that unit, right? Grace has to be in a certain mindset to support Coretta Scott King. You know who that is? That's Martin Luther King's wife. Michelle Obama, Barack Obama's wife.
I know I'm not. I shouldn't have gone out. I'm
No,
sorry.
let me just lay it out for you, right? If I'm just gonna say this. My temper, my shit, my trauma, blah, all that said, right? And I'm not saying I'm a great man, a great man. I am doing great things, not just for me, but for my culture and for the world. That is actually the position I'm in. That's real. I'm not being a dick about it. I didn't ask for it. I've worked, and that's the situation. The woman that supports me, that I support, that needs to be a great woman and make sacrifices the way that man is making for her and for them ultimately. Last night, 2 nights ago, you did not do that. You did not do that.
I'm sorry.
Which took away from the plan. And the plan is everything. If it was just you in the house drunk, maybe I could have swallowed it. Or I would have felt bold enough like, oh, babe, let's just go to bed. Which I said, I'm just going to go to bed. I'm not hungry, blah, 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 blah. Because Grace isn't here. Why? She was drunk. Why else? She was clogged by whatever was going on. You know what I mean? Fine. I can take that. Fine.
Unpopular opinion, but I kind of get where he's coming from over here. Like, I personally think that boundaries are very important in a relationship. Like, you do need to set boundaries and make them very clear to your partner. And I think what he's trying to say, and he's not really doing a good job at saying it, is that, I mean, this life of drinking and partying and stumbling, like, it's not the life for me. I don't see it as him saying that she should stay at home and be supportive towards him. I see it as him saying, I've laid the foundation. And that is a fact. He is the person who is more successful in the relationship at this point. And it was actually brought up on trial that Grace, I really don't want to have to talk about this, but Grace has asked for a lot of money and a lot of things in the relationship. She wasn't really contributing much in the relationship financially. So Priya raised the fact that she had asked him for $20,000 to help her with tax. She was staying in a hotel at some point. She asked Jonathan, she specifically asked him, can you please pay for my hotel bills? She was traveling to and forth from America and the UK quite a lot, and every time she needed to travel, he would pay for it. And towards the end of their relationship, she wasn't really picking up any work as a freelance dancer. That's what she does. She has her own company. So Jonathan had actually given her his credit card to use. So he was paying for her life. He was the provider in the relationship. He was the person who was more successful in the relationship. And for me, when I hear this conversation, I can hear someone who is saying, listen, I have laid down the foundation for us. Like, yes, you're my girl, but you've also got to be out there doing your own thing. Like women like Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King, they were, yes, associated with powerful men, but they were women in their own right. They had their own thing going on. Essentially, he's saying to her, this isn't a free ride. You've got to, like, get up and do your own thing. And this whole thing of you having my credit cards and hanging out with your friends and doing this and doing that, there are things that are constructive that you could be doing with that time, like I am. So after the brief on their relationship, they go into the details about the night of the incident. And she adds that Jonathan twisted her finger and he slapped her across the face. And when the footage came out, I remember seeing that, and the only thing that was shown by the media at the time, on the day that the footage came out, was this. And that looks like a really angry man who is busy abusing his girlfriend. But in actuality, it was something that looked completely different when you saw the whole video. So she was asked about her injuries and why she didn't look like she was injured at all in the videos. And she said that it's because she has a very high pain tolerance. As a professional dancer, she has learned to cope with pain, and that she once had to perform with a broken rib. And one final thing to note about that day is that she was asked about why she went out clubbing with strangers that night after her alleged abuse. And she said that she wanted to show these strangers that she was grateful to them for having saved her that night. At that point, she kind of lost everyone, because it was like, you don't look like you need saving. It looks like he's the one that needs saving in this video. Like, it's strange. Why are you saying that you needed saving? Then Grace didn't finish her testimony that day, and she was due back on the stand again the next day. So day 3 started, and it was Grace again who was on the stand. She hadn't finished her direct examination. So she continued throughout the morning, and she was asked about what she did when she got home from the club. And she said that she tried to call Jonathan, but he didn't pick up. She had tried to call him 32 times, and she was shown the texts that she'd sent him, including one where she said that, can you please call me? I guess that you are with Cleopatra. And there are other messages of her saying that she is going to unalive herself. And she finally managed to get a hold of him. And apparently Jonathan was insinuating that he hadn't done anything wrong. And then Grace said, okay, then come home and explain yourself. But he said, no, he's not coming home. So she says that she was very aware of the fact that she was injured at this point, and her finger was black and bruised, and she noticed that her hair was stuck behind her ear, and when she pulled it off, it was like blood from the ear, and she tried to peel it off. So she sends pictures of the injuries to her friend Holly Blakely, and she's saying that she doesn't know how she got these injuries. And she messages Jonathan afterwards, and there's no mention of the injuries at all. She's completely aware that they're there at that point. She said to Holly she doesn't know how she got them. She messages Jonathan, no mention of the injuries. She's just talking about the cheating. So Jonathan doesn't respond to any of her messages until she says, goodbye, Jonathan. And then he responds and he says, goodbye, Grace. And he asks her to leave her keys when she leaves. I think that this was a bit of a dick move from Jonathan. I mean, we're not talking about someone that you've had a one night stand with. We're talking about your girlfriend for almost 2 years, who's just found out that you have been seeing someone else, someone who is living with you, actually. I think that she deserved more than that in this situation. you could have been a bit more like, okay, cool, let's speak in a few days. Right now, I don't think that it's a good idea for us to speak because we need to calm down, both of us. And had you had done that, Jonathan, I think that things may have turned out a little differently for you in the end. So anyway, Grace goes into how she then just felt like she needed to pack her things. So she went into the closet and she just got like really overwhelmed with everything. So then she went into the toilet. She decided to lock the door and she fell asleep on the heated floor of the toilet. And then it was time for the defense's cross-examination, and the defense was able to show us many things that were inconsistent with Grace's testimony. So first of all, just going to the toilet thing, they show the actual video of Grace being found by the police, and they're like, okay, so just run us through what you're seeing here. And she goes, oh yeah, that's me on the floor. And they're like, is this the toilet? And she's like, this is my closet. And they're like, but you said that you went in the toilet and you locked the door. And she was like, it's the area between the toilet and the closet. And then they're like, okay. And they're like, why did you lock the door? And she goes that she was worried that Jonathan would come back and she was scared of him. And they're like, well, that doesn't make sense because you've been texting him all night, telling him to come back. You tried to phone him 32 times. And when you did speak to him, you told him, come back. On the text messages, you are very insistent that this man needs to come back. So yeah. So at about 8 o'clock in the morning, she speaks to Holly. There's like multiple calls and messages. Told her that she didn't know how she got hurt. She says that when she woke up in the morning, there was blood on her pillow. And then she sends Jonathan a text immediately after this. There's no mention of her being hurt. And then she tells Holly that, she was just sleeping. She's awake now and she's going to start packing. And then things get really interesting because they were able to track down that Jonathan went back into his apartment at 10:23 in the morning. At this time, Grace was still very much awake. She was texting Holly. So she's shown that she was texting Holly at 11:07 a.m. So she's got the proof, she can't deny it. So I'm just going to read this part where Priya's doing the cross-examination and they're talking about this. So Priya asks Miss Jabari, at 11:07 a.m., you were texting Miss Blakely again, correct? And she answers yes. And you're responding to her text asking how you were, correct? Yes. And you responded that you fell asleep, correct? Yes, I fell asleep again on the bed. Yeah. And at 11:07, you said, I'm up now, correct? Yes. And you also said, going to pack now, correct? Yes. And in fact, you sent her 4 messages at 11:07 a.m., correct? Yes, I think so. Approximately 13 minutes after that, that's when the police found you. Isn't that right? I don't know the timings of the next bit. I didn't have a look. You reviewed the body-worn camera footage in this case? I've seen it, yes. Miss Jabari, where were you at 11:07 when you were sending these 4 text messages to your friend Holly? I believe I was in the bathroom area. I'd just been kind of sick. So you're in the bathroom when you sent these text messages? I don't recall the exact place, but it would have either been in the bedroom or the bathroom. So she was awake for about at least another 40 minutes after Jonathan was in the actual building. At 10:57 in the morning, after spending 34 minutes in his apartment and trying to get to Grace in the room that's locked, Jonathan goes downstairs to try and get help from a locksmith or someone that can help him open the room that Grace is in. And then the locksmith goes up at 11:07 a.m. So this is now round about the time when Grace sends the last text to Holly. And then at 11:14, which is about 5 minutes since Grace sent a text to her friend, Jonathan calls the police. So somehow in 5 minutes, she has passed out so badly that someone feels like she needs to phone the police. And then the police were really quick to respond. They were there almost immediately. It obviously took them a while to walk up because it's quite a big penthouse. Apparently it's got like 3 flights of stairs. That's what they kept talking about, that it's like 3 stories high. Anyway, so they get into the penthouse. They got to Grace at 11:20. She wakes up with the police around her. So 13 minutes later, she wakes up and there's suddenly police around. She is saying that she didn't hear Jonathan come in. She didn't hear Jonathan bang the door. She did not hear Jonathan try to wake her up when he was eventually able to get inside the door. And she did not hear him phoning the police. But the thing is, I don't think that Grace went into this blindly. I mean, that's the way that she was being represented by the media, like as this sad, petite woman who was really going at all of this alone. And on top of all of that, she had to have her ex's new relationship thrown in her face every day. I mean, Jonathan and his team probably knew what they were doing with that. They did it on purpose. But Grace needed to come across as a sad, lonely woman, when the reality of it is that she probably had more people around her than Jonathan did. Her parents are both lawyers. I mean, they practice in the UK, but you can hardly tell the difference if you're 2 experienced lawyers. And then she has an older sister who's also a lawyer who actually lives in New York. So her family was definitely able to give her legal advice. An example of this is how she managed to brilliantly avoid the subject of her being the aggressor that night. The reason why the pictures of Jonathan Major's injuries and torn clothes were not allowed into evidence is because, firstly, Jonathan didn't make an affirmative self-defense argument, and that allowed Grace to pretty much, when she saw the pictures, to just be like, I don't know what this is. I've never seen this before in my life. Got no clue. Like, those could be his clothes. Couldn't, I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. The judge said that they didn't lay the foundation. And it's kind of true. Grace was really, really smart in the way that she handled that situation. It completely dismissed the fact that Jonathan had all this evidence that he had been putting together of his own experience of having been on the receiving end of the violence that happened that night. And Priya Chaudhry did try to also point out that Grace had gotten a lot of help from the DA's office. And that help firstly came in the form of consultations that she had with the DA, where they were able to show her all the evidence and the footage that would be presented in court prior to her being on the witness stand. And that would have definitely boosted her confidence when she was in the courtroom. And she also received financial benefits from the DA, and some were reasonable and some were a little questionable. I mean, she emailed them with her medical bill, which was almost $5,000. And she also said that she had about $750 worth of clothing that needed to be replaced. But when she was asked what clothes were damaged, she said none. She also asked for $250 because of personal hygiene products that needed to be replaced. She had also applied through the Victim Services Unit for compensation for moving costs related to this incident. So she couldn't really clarify what had been paid when she was asked to testify about this. But why does the state need to pay for her moving costs? So they had paid for her to travel from the UK, and they were paying for all of her travel expenses while she was testifying. So that was for about a week. So anyway, this would have been a great day for the defense because there were so many inconsistencies with Grace, but they took it a step too far. On the morning of the 25th, Grace had sent Jonathan some messages that were talking about her ex who unalived himself when she was in high school. So when Priya and her team brought up the situation with the boyfriend who unalived himself, Grace broke down and started crying. And that made the defense team look like a bunch of assholes. Okay, and then we had day 4. And at this point, the defense was kind of like, we need to go big or go home. And they went into Grace and her drinking. So Grace goes into the witness stand, and the defense started the cross-examination by asking her about dinner that night and how much she'd had to drink. At some point, Jonathan gets up and he goes to the men's room, and she gets up to see if he's gone around the corner, and he can't see her anymore. So she goes back into the table and she has a margarita on her table and she chugs it down in one gulp. And then they talk about the actual incident and how Grace was using the hand that she was injured on the entire night, including her dancing in the club. Her being on the dance floor, she reaches over to the DJ and gets something from him, which I'm not sure if it's the herb or if it's just a normal cigarette, but she starts smoking that thing in the middle of the dance floor while she's dancing around people with the hand that she is apparently injured on. And then she is also seen using that same hand trying to get her card out of her wallet. Mind you, by the way, she's using Jonathan's card. Apparently the table that they're sitting in, if you look up Lucy's, a table on a Friday night at that place is about $2,000. The champagne that they ordered, apparently it's about $2,000 a bottle as well. She was ordering tequila shots. She's seen at the bar trying to get her credit card out. She pays, takes the credit card, stuffs it back into her bag using that same hand. And then she goes, takes the drinks with that same hand. So at this point, people are saying that it's probably just the hand that she uses. She is right-handed, so it just comes as second nature to her to do this. But there are experts who have said that, at this point, she should have been in a heck of a lot of pain and should have been showing something, anything to show that she was in pain. But there is there's no inclination when you see her in these videos even trying to use a different hand. She is using the hand that she is injured on as though there is absolutely nothing there. So things get worse. So the footage from the police body cam gets played, and she really doesn't want to watch it. Like, I actually even felt bad for her. I can't imagine that would have been easy for her to watch it. So she is shown waking up and just being extremely confused about her situation. And she's asked what happened in the footage. And she says that she fell asleep on her bed. And she's really confused. She's like, what happened? What happened? What happened to my ear? I can feel something's wrong with my finger. What happened to my finger? Am I hurt? Why are you guys here? That morning, she had texted her friends. 13 minutes ago, she was texting Holly. She was very aware up until 13 minutes ago about these injuries. And the thing that also really got her at this point was that she looks at Jonathan and she asks the police, what did he do, pointing at Jonathan? And then at that point, the police ask Jonathan to leave the room. So she is repeatedly asked what happened, and she says that she doesn't know. And when I say repeatedly, I'm not saying 5 or 6 times. The defense counted that she was asked about 16 times. And then she also says to the police that she didn't know she'd fallen. So when she's asked why, she's now telling a completely different story. She explains that it's because that she was trying to protect Jonathan. And then Priya brilliantly brings up the fact that when you woke up over here, the first thing you did when you woke up was ask, what happened? What happened? What happened to my arm? What happened to my ear? But you were the first person to suggest that Jonathan had done something wrong. You looked at Jonathan, you looked at the police, and you said, what did he do? So how are you trying to protect him? Because you were the first person that brought that up. So if you're trying to keep up with everything that Grace is actually saying about the morning of the 25th, let me help you. Come on, let's do this together. So on the 25th of March, when the police arrived and asked her what happened, she said that she couldn't remember. She just remembered falling asleep on her bed. And that's her first explanation. Then, on day one of the trial, she's asked again, Grace, what exactly happened? And she says that she was packing her things and then she got really overwhelmed. So she decided that she wanted to sleep on the floor of the toilet because it was heated. And she also felt like she needed to lock herself in the toilet. And now that's her second explanation, which the defense shredded into pieces. And then she said that she thinks she might have fallen when the police got there. And she texted that to her friend Holly as well when she was in the hospital. But that was kind of said off the record, so we'll ignore that one. But now, her third explanation is that she fainted. She passed out in the closet. So that's everything we have so far. Now, I'm not saying that Grace is a lying liar who lies. I am not saying that Jonathan had nothing to do with her injuries that night. What I am saying is that her memory of the events that took place on the night in question, it should absolutely not be relied on. If I was a jury, I would have completely disregarded anything that she had said in this point. I mean, I can't imagine that it would be easy for her to be on the stand talking about the things that have happened in so much detail as well. But we're talking about not only her life, Jonathan's life. He's also a human being and he's about to lose everything over this if he is found guilty. So all the facts, they need to add up. And right now, nothing is adding up with what Grace is saying. So on day 5, we started to see things fall apart a little bit for Jonathan. The day starts and the prosecution immediately goes into an unknown event that took place in September 2022. The defense objects to this and the judge continues to allow these messages to be brought forward as evidence. And Grace continues to talk about this incident and doesn't give any context as to what had happened. So basically leaving it to our imaginations. And they read like this. It's just fake. I fear you have no perspective of what could happen if you go to the hospital. They will ask you questions, and as I don't think that you would actually protect us, it could lead to an investigation even if you do lie and they suspect something. And then Grace responds, I will tell the doctor I bumped my head. If I go, I'm going to give it one more day, but I can't sleep and I need some stronger painkillers. That's all. Why would I want to tell them what really happened when it's clear that I want to be with you? I feel like you want us to be together to not embarrass yourself for everything that you've said to your friends and family. Last night I considered unaliving myself versus coming home. You said you needed love last night and I put my feelings aside and tried to give you that. I need love too. Or maybe I'm such a monster and a horrible man and I don't deserve it and I should unalive myself. This way of existence is miserable. I want to be unalive. And then Grace responds, I will not go to the doctor if you don't feel safe with me doing so or don't trust me. I promise I would never mention you, but I understand your fear. And then more text and Jonathan's just like, I'm a monster. I'm a horrible man, not capable of love. I am unaliving myself soon. I've already put things in motion. And Grace is like, you can't say this. I'm going to have to call someone. I'm sorry of not hugging you this morning. I was sleepy and disoriented by the fact that you thought I would break your necklace. I love you so much, obviously. What do you mean you've put this in motion? So Jonathan just completely came across as though he is extremely manipulative and controlling. And everyone after reading this was pretty much convinced that he was a very, very selfish and abusive man towards Grace. Neither Grace or Jonathan have really gone into detail. They've never told us what they were talking about in these messages. But Elite from a great podcast that I listen to called Legal Bites, She's explained a couple of things about these texts very well. Firstly, she goes into how, as a black man, that he might carry an extreme amount of anxiety, and regardless of what happened, if Grace goes to the hospital, even if it was a genuine mistake, we don't know what happened at this point. Even if it was a genuine mistake, people will immediately assume that he was in the wrong and he had malicious intent. And secondly, another really, really important thing to note is that on day 2, Grace testified that until the 24th of March, Jonathan had never, ever been physically abusive towards her. And then we had a really important testimony on the day that was from Officer Swain, who was one of the policemen that was called on the scene. And it seemed like he was a person that was also kind of calling all the shots. Like, he was asked if Jonathan had said anything on the day about his own injuries, and then Officer Swain said no, Jonathan didn't say anything about his own injuries. And they played the footage, and it shows Jonathan clearly speaking to them and showing them his own coat to say, like, look, I'm injured, I don't even know where she's been, but look. And then on day 6, we had Chloe Zilla, one of the people that met Grace on the sidewalk and then went clubbing after that incident. An important thing about her testimony was that she confirms that Grace did in fact complain about pain on her right hand, and she gave Grace some ice to help her with this pain. But she also testifies that Grace did walk into a wall that night on her way out of the club. She was going to catch a cab home, and this was something that Grace said had never happened. And she said that she just basically brushed past the wall. But when she was presented with the video evidence to support the claim that she had walked into the wall, and not only that, but she had repeatedly been hugging Chloe all night, hugged her. At some point, the ears touch where she is injured. That area touches Chloe quite a few times that night. And on their way out, Grace is seen hugging her and also patting her on the back and rubbing her back with the hand that is injured. And then one of the other guys from that night, Max Manning, who is Chloe's boyfriend, also testified, and he didn't really have a lot to say. There isn't much that's come out about his testimony, except for the fact that he says that he had not seen any injuries on Grace. His testimony doesn't have as much credibility to it as Chloe's does, because Chloe is the person that was she was the closest person to Grace that night. But the thing about Chloe's testimony is that she does bring up the fact that she was pretty intoxicated that night as well. And she had been from the very first moment that she met Grace. She said that when she was walking down the stairs coming out of her apartment, she realized how intoxicated she actually was. So when this comes up, the defense kind of goes, so do you think that that would have any effect on how you remember Grace phrasing the fact that she was injured? Do you think that Grace told you that she was injured and she complained about her hand? Or did Grace just say that she needed ice? Which one? Which do you think it is? And Chloe was kind of like, yeah, I guess it could have been. I don't know. I was drunk. And then we had Dr. William Chang, the physician who was responsible for Grace's examination on the morning of the 25th of March. And he testified that Grace had apparently told him that she didn't know how she got her injuries. Even though Jonathan was nowhere near her, because she said the reason why she kept saying that Jonathan had not hurt her in front of the paramedics was because she was fearful of the fact that she knew that he was right there. So this guy gave her an ordered C test, which is basically checking if she has an alcohol use disorder. And the results showed that she is at risk of alcohol use disorder. And then the final witness, which was Naveed Sawar. I am sorry if I did not pronounce that properly. But he was the driver of the car. So he ran through the events and he said that he could hear that Jonathan was asking her to stop and she was hitting him. He said that it sounded like Grace was the aggressor, and the strange thing about him is that he was the witness for the state. He wasn't even there for the defense's side. And then the defense came in with their cross-examination and they asked if he had found any blood on the car, because remember, Grace said that she had been hit with a blow on the head, which is where she thinks she got the ear injury. And he said, no, there was no blood in the car at all. So I'm no medical expert, but it does look like it's a very deep cut. And that would cause a lot of bleeding. When I look at that, I would expect someone to have bled quite a lot. And there is no blood. There is no mention. Nobody. There is no blood in her ear when you see her out meeting Chloe. There is no pain when she's hugging people. There's no indication of pain when she's hugging people. She's wearing like a white top as well. I'd get it maybe if her hair is blonde. You would be able to see blood on her hair, but there's no blood at all. Like, how? The only thing that came out from that thing was a bit of blood that Grace discovered stuck on the back of her ear on the morning of the 25th. And then we have day 7, where we heard from 2 more police officers who were on the scene on the 25th of March. And Grace's talent manager and a DV expert. And not much came out of these witnesses in terms of relevance to the outcome. And then we had day 8, which was the final day of testimony. And this was a chance for the defense to sort of really push their case forward. And they had 3 witnesses to help them do this. So we had another policeman that was on the scene, whom I believe that it's his body cam that we are seeing through this video. And we had a medical expert, so they brought in their own medical expert. And then we had a rep from Jonathan's agent. So Jonathan chose to evoke the 5th Amendment and not testify. And I think that this is the one decision that he would end up regretting, because there were 3 people in that car that night. And Grace is saying that he hit her. The driver was saying that he didn't see anything, but from what he could make out, Grace was the aggressor. And I think that Jonathan's testimony would have been really useful to prove that Grace was the aggressor. So it would have been a case of like 2 against 1 person out of the 3 people who were in the car. And I personally think that this might have taken a bit of the sting away from the voice recording that was played, the one about Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King. Very much like what he ended up doing anyway after the trial when he decided to speak up. I mean, he could have said that this conversation was a result of the demands on him and his work, and him trying to express to his partner that she needs to understand the sacrifices that he has made. So the policeman that was there to testify said that Jonathan did report that he had some injuries and damages from the incident. And they appear to be questioning him about Grace's injuries over here, to which he says that he doesn't know. So he's clearly pointing that he too has injuries that were overlooked. So that policeman was basically there for the defense to say that he did in fact tell us definitely that he also had injuries. And then they brought in their own medical expert, and she saw the x-rays and the pictures from the ear laceration, and she said that in her opinion this looked more like a cut from a sharp object. And if it was from a direct blow, like Grace is saying, that there would have been a lot more bruising in the area. of the injury, but there was hardly any bruising, and that there would have been a significant amount of blood. And then there's Jonathan's agent, Elin Ruspoli. And I wasn't initially planning on doing this part where I talk about his testimony, but I've realized that he's actually played a really huge role, not only by going on the witness stand and testifying on Jonathan's behalf, but on the actual night and the morning when this happened. And when you see Jonathan get into the lift in the hotel, he's actually talking to Elin. He's on the phone with him when he gets back into his apartment that in the morning. And he's on the phone with him when he realizes that Grace has locked herself in the closet/bathroom. So Elin witnesses everything when Jonathan is trying to wake Grace up. He's basically in the background trying to calm Jonathan down. And in his testimony, he says that Jonathan was beyond hysterical. He absolutely lost his mind when he realized that Grace was in the room. And not only that she had taken a pill or pills at the time he didn't know. And when he saw the sick on the bed, he says that Jonathan just completely lost his mind. Even goes as far as to kind of demonstrate like how much he was screaming and shouting for Grace. He said that it was like nothing he'd ever heard before. Even goes as far as to bang on the witness stand, like really, really loudly. Everybody in the room was shocked. So essentially, him being on the witness stand, he was there to testify. There's no way that someone that was conscious wouldn't have heard any of that, because Jonathan was hysterical. So anyway, closing arguments began on the 18th of December 2023, and Jonathan was almost immediately found guilty of one count of reckless assault in the 3rd degree, which is a misdemeanor, and a charge of harassment as a violation, which is not a crime. And this is kind of like the same thing as getting a speeding ticket. He was acquitted of the more serious charges of assault and one for aggravated harassment, which showed that the jury kind of believed that he didn't injure her, and they didn't really believe Grace's story, but they do think that she did get injured that night and that he did it accidentally. Essentially, this does say that he's guilty. We're here talking about the 24th of March, and a lot of people are like, I mean, there's just too much of a difference between the time that they were together. There's a really good chance that he may have not had anything to do with her injuries, especially if she'd been drinking. So his sentencing was set for the 6th of February. And to say that there was a massive uproar online would be an understatement. Most of the arguments that I was seeing online were based on the notion that Grace was playing the victim, when it actually did look like she was playing a very active role in whatever it is that we witnessed in that street camera footage. And some people say that Jonathan's legal team let him down. Reasonable doubt was the currency in this case. And Jonathan's attorney, Priya Chowdhury, kind of spent more of her time trying to convince everyone that Grace is a liar. And then even when there was a witness who had said that, no, Grace did in fact complain about having injuries when she was at the club, she did not change her argument at all. She just continued saying that Grace is a liar, Grace is a liar. Whereas at that point, what she could have done differently, once there was a witness that said that Grace had complained about being injured when she was at the club, what she should have been a bit more focused on was trying to prove that there are like 10 other things that could have happened to her during that night that could have caused her to have been injured at that point, even if she was injured. I mean, you know, that's what she should have gone with at that point. There were too many holes in Grace's story. And it seemed like the outcome of the entire thing was based on people's bias. And now please bear in mind, I am not saying that Jonathan had nothing to do with Grace's injuries that night. What I am saying is that there was reasonable doubt. And in a democracy, you are innocent until proven guilty. But in this case, it looked like Jonathan was guilty until he was proven innocent. It was somehow the other way around. Like, from the moment he walked through those doors, everyone had pretty much made up their minds that this man was guilty. If we can say that Jonathan did this with absolute certainty, if we can say that those injuries 150% came from Jonathan physically harming this woman, then cool, yeah. But there's just too much doubt for me. I mean, let's go through the list. So in the car, Grace states that Jonathan physically abused her, but the driver of the car says that from what he can make out, she was the aggressor. That's doubt. She says that Jonathan twisted her arm and whacked her across the face, which probably caused the injury behind her ear. But there was no blood in the car, according to the driver, who was the state's own witness. And a medical expert says that if a cut was from being hit, it should have been swollen and bruised. That's doubt. She says that she knows how she got the injuries, but when the police got there, the first thing she did was ask how she got those injuries. That's doubt. She has given an unclear narrative of what happened that night and had claimed that she did not drink to a point where it was even possible to injure herself. But she walked into a wall when she doesn't even remember doing it. Doubt. The list goes on and on. The case was very far from clear. And the fact that Jonathan also claimed to have been assaulted and his proof for this was completely overlooked. Like, many people were unhappy with the outcome, but now Jonathan just needed to wait for his sentencing. So since all of this came out, there was some pretty swift action from all the organizations that were associated with Jonathan. The US Army pretty much immediately pulled their ad campaign with Jonathan, and so did the Texas Rangers, who had a 2023 season ad campaign. He was dropped by his PR representatives, the lead company, and his management team at Entertainment 360. The Met Gala revoked their invitation after plans for him to show up alongside Valentino. And there were rumors of Jonathan being dropped by Disney as Kang the Conqueror for the new Avengers film. And then in October 2023, Magazine Dreams was removed from the release schedule. It was due to be released in December 2023, but after all of this started happening, Starlight, who were owned by Disney, were like, no, thank you very much. And once Jonathan was found guilty in December, Disney pretty much immediately announced that they were going to drop him as Kang the Conqueror. It was like an hour after he was found guilty. They pretty much had that one locked and loaded. That was it with the film, but we will talk about that a little bit more soon. So Jonathan was supposed to be sentenced in February 2024. While we're waiting for his sentencing, we got the announcement that Jonathan finally wanted to have a say in the whole matter, and he would sit down with anchor Lindsay Davis in a Good Morning America interview. Mind you, GMA is owned by Disney, who also own the MCU. So things started to get a little interesting. We all started to think that Disney may have been doing this to gauge the public's interest, to see how we would react to what they will probably end up doing, which would be to rehire Kang the Conqueror. So anyway, the interview addresses everything. What did he think about the outcome of the trial?
Shock. I was absolutely shocked and afraid. And I'm standing there, and the verdict comes down. I say, how is that possible? Based off the evidence, based off the prosecution's evidence, let alone our evidence. How is that possible?
Has he ever abused anyone physically?
I've had very few relationships, so I can gather what situations we're talking about. Yeah, I was not the best boyfriend all the time.
But never hit a woman?
Never hit a woman. My hands have never struck a woman, ever.
What did he mean about the whole Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King thing?
It was me trying to give an analogy of what it is I'm aspiring to be. You know, these great men, Martin,
President Obama, in trying to give a reference point to that. One of the things I also say is like, I need her, in that case Grace, to make the same sacrifices that I am making.
What he thinks about the entire saga.
If you watch those videos and you reverse that, and you saw a black man chasing a young white girl down the street, screaming and crying, that man is going to be shot and killed.
And whether he thinks he should get a second chance.
Well, I think I do. I hope other people think that.
And then he was eventually sentenced in April 2024. And for me, I think this is probably the best outcome of everything, because he can come back from this. What this sentencing says to me is that he is believed to be in need of therapy, and lots of it. And then things kind of simmered down again, but then MCU made their next move. In the 2024 Comic-Con, it was announced that Kang would be replaced by an even bigger Marvel villain called Doctor Doom. This villain, however, will be played by Robert Downey Jr. And the internet went crazy. You see, Robert Downey Jr. has had a lot of run-ins with the law, and some people thought that this was extremely unfair. How can you fire someone because he was convicted of a misdemeanor and then hire Robert Downey Jr. as his replacement? Now, I've seen some people online saying that Robert Downey Jr. has actually never been convicted of anything serious, and that it took him a really, really long time to kind of, you know, get any work in Hollywood and all of that. So let's talk about Robert Downey Jr. Robert Downey Jr. was born on the 4th of April 1965 in Manhattan, New York. His father, Robert Downey Sr., was a very big director and screenplayer. His style was really avant-garde. Like, I'm pretty sure I've actually even seen one of those IKEA like wall pictures with Robert Downey Sr. like this. Like, he was a pretty cool dude. And his mother, Elsie Downey, was an accomplished actress and screenwriter, and she also struggled with alcoholism. When RDJ was about 5, he debuted as a child actor in his father's film Pound, and he actually stood out. People were quite impressed with him, and he would make another appearance in a film called Grease's Palace, where he was also acting alongside his mother. Robert was just 6 years old when his father introduced him to the herb, and this is basically how it all started. He would hang out with his folks and he'd partake. So to say that his home was bohemian would be a bit of an understatement. It was always full of people and artists and art, and most of the time those people happened to be drunk or high. And his dad loved his work. He had a camera that he took everywhere he went, and he turned everything into a film. Even the family fights were turned into films. So his parents noticed that he really had a knack for acting and just kept giving him roles in their films. And despite the substances that he was exposed to, Robert had a pretty lush life. When he was about 10, the family spent a year living in London, Chelsea. Now, even if you don't know anything about England, I'm sure you've heard of the Chelsea Football Club, and I'm sure that you've seen the reality TV show Made in Chelsea. So it's a really nice place to live. During this time, Robert was sent to the Perry House School where he studied ballet. At 13, his parents separated and Robert decided to move with his father to LA, where he attended Santa Monica High School. And among his group of friends were Sean Penn, Rob Lowe, Charlie Sheen, and Emilio Estevez. So at this point, Robert had many films that were directed by his father, and his father was just getting like a lot of free labor, and RDJ was not getting any credit for the work that he was doing for his dad. To make things worse, RDJ remembers that there was a lot of the herb and the white stuff that he would take with his father, and he just saw this as a chance to bond with Robert Sr., and they did have a very close bond, but mostly through their love of substances. Then at 17, RDJ decided to drop out of high school and move back in with his mother in New York, and he pursued acting full-time. And this is when he would actually find some part-time work. And he also got a film role in a film called Baby It's You. And this was the first film that he appeared in that was not his father's film. Not long after, he met Sarah Jessica Parker on the set of another film, and they started dating. They moved in together 8 weeks into their relationship, and their relationship lasted over 8 years. But it was a nightmare for Sarah Jessica Parker.
Adventurous, important 8 years of my life. We were together for a long time, and, you know, he's the first person that I lived with, and you know, his career was really just beginning, and I was so proud to see his success and, you know, watch him grow professionally. But also, I mean, it's, you know, no secret that he was struggling, and I had not ever been exposed to that, so I didn't feel particularly equipped. I mean, I had to learn how to be with somebody who was, you know, dealing with addiction. So I think those were really important years. There's a lot of good memories, but there's also a lot of time spent learning about how we survive, and at what point, you know, do you stop taking care of somebody.
The couple were both very busy, and Robert even became a member of the SNL cast, but he was voted as the worst SNL member ever, or something along those lines. I'm not really sure. But during the relationship, Robert starred in the movie Less Than Zero, where he took the role of a junkie, and he famously said that this character was the ghost of Christmas Future. He was pretty much a part-time user up until that point, and he said that this character was an exaggeration of himself, but by the end of filming, he was an exaggeration of the character. And his manager picked up on this and spoke to him about this and booked him into rehab. He went to this, but as soon as it was over, he fired his manager. The role carried on coming, and in 1992, he married Deborah Lynn Falkinger after 42 days of dating. The two initially bonded over their love of parties and substance abuse, and a year later, they had a child, Indio. There is a little story about Robert Downey Jr. walking into a gift shop. So the owners of the shop recognize him, and just when they're starting to really get excited about this, they notice that he is extremely high. So he's carrying his child in one hand, and he's carrying a basket on the other hand, and he's just throwing in a bunch of random things in the basket, and they start following him around the shop because they were just so worried. They just wanted to make sure that he just didn't drop Indio. And when he left, they realized that they were so on edge that they forgot to charge him for $1,000 worth of stuff that he had taken. Like his father, he was also a very doting father, but there was that problem with substances. And did you guys know that in a film called Only You, he starred alongside Marissa Tomei, and the two had a little short-lived romance while he was married, and it was very public as well. The two eventually went their separate ways, and it's because of Robert that Marissa actually got the role of Aunt May in the new Spider-Man. So anyway, by 1995, his usage was really bad. It was so bad. He was caught speeding in his Ferrari, and when the police pulled him over, they found out that he was not only naked, but he started throwing imaginary rocks at them. And then he actually became referred to as a lovable tornado. In 1996, his wife left him, and Sean Penn arranged an intervention for him, and he was taken to rehab again. But he only spent 3 days in there. He lost his apartment, and he started couch surfing. And then on the 23rd of June, he was arrested again for speeding. And can we please stop brushing over speeding? There should be stricter laws against that. People could die. So anyway, he was found with a lot of different substances and a .357 Magnum. He was arrested and was released on bail. And then a month later, while he was on parole, he was arrested again, and this time for breaking into his neighbor's house. His neighbors found him undressed in their son's bed. So they phoned the police, and the police got there, and he had completely passed out. So they had to give him Narcan to wake him up. It was that bad. Now, just imagine being the child that had to witness all of this. This is all probably engraved in his mind for the rest of his life. So he was taken to rehab again, and he escaped 2 days later. He was captured by the authorities a few days later, and he was held in custody for 9 days. Then he was ordered to participate in another drug rehabilitation program, and he actually did try this time around. On the 11th of September 1996, he had to be in court because of the first incident where he was driving under the influence and was publicly exposing himself while being in possession of illegal substances and being in possession of a weapon and assaulting a police. That one. Yeah. So he pleaded no contest to it, which is him pretty much saying that he neither admits or disputes the charges. He was ordered to spend 6 months in rehab, and he had to face 3 years of probation. So while all this was going on, he had a film that was set to be released in August, Danger Zone. So the release went ahead as planned, and there were no issues there. And a couple of months later, he hosted Saturday Night Live. And he made a lot of jokes about his issues.
The same old, same old. I did have a really interesting summer, though. In fact, I brought some slides of what I did on my summer vacation. Would you like to see them? Well, it wouldn't be a summer without hosting a barbecue. Yeah. Here's me picking up a little prescription from my pharmacist. And here's me and my personal trainer. That guy works me hard. He really does, but it's worth it when you take off your shirt at the beach, which is where I was going in this next picture. Yeah. You know, you just go with your buddies carpool lane. It's sweet. And here's me at Disneyland. This next one is of me when I stayed at this terrific guest house in Malibu. It was actually 2 doors down from my own house, but, you know, yeah.
Then he was released early from rehab due to good behavior in November. And then the same month, he was approached by writer and director James Toback, who asked him to be the lead in his film 2 Girls and a Guy. This film was shot and released less than a year after his conviction. The producers had to pay $30,000 to insure RDJ for the film and had to submit mandatory substance tests at the end of each day. In September 1997, Robert relapsed and went on a 4-day bender while still reporting to the judge with his mandatory tests. He was allowed to complete the film that he was working on called In Dreams, but was due back in court in December. The director of the movie said that on the first day, he showed up late for work, he was barefoot, and there was a weapon sticking out of the bag that he was carrying. He also had another role that was given to him by Sean Penn. This was a supporting role in his film Hugo Pool. So he returned to court in December 1997, and the judge was like, okay, you've had many chances to sort your life out, and you didn't. And now I'm going to have to be mean to you. He was sent to the Twin Towers Correctional Facility where he served 111 days in total. The prison was not great for Robert Downey Jr. Some of the people that were in there, they weren't happy when they saw RDJ with his celebrity status walking into the prison, knowing that he's got 100 days and then he's out of there. It is basically like getting a slap on the hand. So they made things a little bit more harder for him while he was in prison than they actually needed to be. No, in fact, they made his experience in prison unbearable. So I've seen a really disturbing video of RDJ just laying on the floor and there's blood around him. And I don't know what his other inmates are doing around him. But then one guy, I think he may have been trying to rescue him. But even in the way that he was rescuing him, he literally just like picks him up like he's a puppet and drags him off the floor. It was really disturbing to watch. Yeah, he didn't have a great time in prison. And then in 1998, the Gingerbread Man was released. He had worked on this prior to his incarceration, and this film did not do very well. I think this is when the studios realized that they needed to really think about whether they wanted to carry on making films with him, because at this point he'd been in and out of rehab and getting into all sorts of trouble and just being completely high and not performing at work, if he showed up at all. When he was released from prison, he entered a 60-day rehab program, and the same month he was released, the action crime thriller US Marshals was released. And the film had mixed reviews, but it was a great commercial success. So it all seemed like he was working on getting better, and he was also seen with his wife again. But at this point, he was pretty much broke. He had, of course, spent lots of his money on substances. He would host these really lavish stripper parties, and he had a lot of rehab bills. And then he had another film released in January 1999, and this was a complete failure commercially. He was in another film that was released mid-1999 called Friends and Lovers. And he also had two films, Black and White and God, the Devil and Bob. Then he appeared in court again to face his previous parole violation, and he got the firm that represented O.J. Simpson to represent him. And this is where he famously said, "It's like I've got a shotgun in my mouth with my finger on the trigger, and I like the taste of the gun metal." He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. And after a few months in prison, he appealed and was successful and released. So he had a couple of new releases that were filmed before he went to prison. But after prison, he was cast as Larry Paul on the TV show Ally McBeal. Now, this is when I started watching TV, and well, more like when I really started to understand what I was watching when I was watching TV. And he was on the show for, I think, about 21 episodes. And I remember that we rarely saw him on screen, but when he would make his appearances, he would be absolutely brilliant. Like, if you haven't seen the show, he was kind of like Mr. Big on Sex and the City. Ally McBeal had seen many men throughout the show, but he was the guy that was the love of her life. But he was kind of elusive, and she couldn't really have him. There was always something that would get in the way of them really being together. And even as a little child, Robert made me understand what it was like to love someone that you couldn't be with, just through his portrayal as Larry on that show. But as a grown woman now, I understand that he was elusive because he was struggling with his addiction. And he was still broke because now he also had tax liens totaling more than $1 million. And he was depressed because everything had taken a toll on his private life. Then on the Thanksgiving weekend, he relapsed again. He went to a strip club where he made some friends that offered him a line, and he took it. Then they went back to his hotel, and the police received a call about Robert being drunk and disorderly. The exact words of the people making the phone call were that there is a man with an ounce of and a couple of and he is very upset. The police came, they searched his room, they found a lot of illegal substances, and he got arrested for this. He was sent to see a psychiatrist and take medication for his depression. This light form of punishment came because he was able to prove that the search of his hotel room was unconstitutional, and therefore all the evidence found was invalid. And his friend, Tom Sizemore, said that he relapsed on the exact same day that he was released from these charges. And then about 5 months later, he was arrested again. He was found on the side of an alley, barefoot and high, but he wasn't caught with any substances. So again, he was ordered to go to rehab. He was told that if he finds himself in court again, he will go to prison and he will serve the maximum 4-year sentence. At this point, everyone in his life, his family, his friends, his bank accounts, they had all had enough. The producers of Ally McBeal also decided that they needed to fire him. He still went on to win a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor in a Series, and he won a Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Male in a Comedy Series. Then Mel Gibson not only took him in to live with him, but also said to any filmmaker that Robert wanted to work with that he would cover the insurance money if Robert was cast in whatever role the filmmakers took him on. He was rumored to have been dating Ally McBeal herself, Carissa Flockhart, and then he also went on to date a fashion publicist. I think her name was Christy Board or Jordan. He spent a year in rehab and kind of took a small breather. He made appearances in 2 short films, Lethargy and Whatever We Do. He worked on The Singing Detective with Mel Gibson. He also appeared in the music video for Elton John, I Want Love. And Sam Taylor Johnson, the director, asked him to work with him in an art video for something else. His first film back on the big screen was in the 2003 film Gothica, and that was it. He hasn't been arrested since then, and I think that he's been clean and he's been making some real art. Since then, we've seen him in movies such as Kiss Kiss, Bang Bang, Good Night and Good Luck, and of course, Iron Man in the Avengers franchise and many more. So yeah, the internet has been buzzing over this and people are really divided. There are some hardcore Marvel fans who were just like, yes, this is exactly what we needed. And there are others who are like, how is this even possible that RDJ has been hired to replace Jonathan Majors, who was fired because of legal issues, when RDA has had so many of his own in the past? So race has been at the forefront of this argument. Since Jonathan's conviction, questions have been raised about whether a white person who had gone through the exact same series of events, if they would have been treated the same way that Jonathan has been treated. Would he have been arrested immediately on the morning of the 25th? Would his counter charges against Grace, having been the aggressor, have been taken more seriously? Would he have been found guilty, even though all the evidence clearly shows that what he was trying to do was to get away from Grace? And most importantly, would he have lost everything? And I mean everything, the way that he did. Robert Downey Jr. found himself in many legal problems before he got to the point where people eventually gave up on him. And during that entire time, he was working. He had people that just kept giving him more and more work until he was literally a liability because of the insurance money that was required to hire him. And Robert keeps finding himself in tricky situations that involve topics that are very similar to this. Now, before we go through any of this, I just want to say on record that I absolutely love Robert Downey Jr. Like I told you, my earliest memories of TV were of him playing Larry Paul on Ally McBeal, and I really don't want to have to do this, but there you go. In 2008, Tropic Thunder was released, which is a comedy that basically shows how you get the different types of celebrities. It's just making fun of the whole culture of Hollywood. But then RDJ plays a character called Kirk Lazarus, who is an Australian method actor that is cast in a movie within the film, where he's supposed to be black. But anyway, RDJ wears blackface throughout the film, and it kind of makes you cringe. Like, it kind of sucks because the film is funny, but it's just so distasteful. Like, why is it so hard to leave blackface in the past, guys? Can we just leave it? Leave it alone. Don't touch it. Well, there were people who are just like, I mean, surely there are other ways to make comedy. Why did you have to do it like that? And Robert Downey Jr.'s response to this was in the Joe Rogan show, and this is what he had to say.
He knew exactly what the vision for this was. He executed it. It was impossible to not have it be an offensive nightmare of a movie. And 90% of my black friends are like, dude, that was great.
What about the other 10%?
I can't disagree with them, but I know where my heart was.
Yeah.
And I think that it's never an excuse to do something that is out of place and not of its time. But to me, it was just it was a blasting cap on. And by the way, I think White Chicks came out pretty soon after that. Yeah. And I was like, I love that. Yeah. I was like, that was great. Yeah. So, yeah.
Isn't blackface something that was used as a propaganda tool to aid in systematic oppression? It was a tool that was used by white actors who would play black characters, showing them as childlike, lazy, hypersexual idiots. And even today, those ideologies still exist. Black people are still fighting today to get rid of all those negative connotations. That's what blackface represents, right? And isn't White Chicks a film that portrays the lives of Paris and Nikki Hilton? What did I miss? And that's not the only incident that is similar to this that Robert Downey Jr. has found himself in. He also had the Iron Man incident with Terrence Howard. So basically, Terrence Howard was originally cast as James Rhodes, who is basically Iron Man's best friend. And I would have expected the two to have been very close during filming, but then Terrence doesn't return for the second film. He has come out saying that the MCU didn't want to meet what was agreed in terms of payment, and he refused the deal that they gave him, which was smaller. So he reached out to RDJ to try and get him to help out as a friend to sort of help negotiate, but he says that RDJ completely ghosted him. But according to Robert, he had no control over the situation. The maker of the film, Jon Favreau, was quite intent on firing Terrence because he was apparently not happy with his performance, and they'd spent quite a lot of time cutting and reshooting his scenes. Nobody had told Terrence about the issues with his performance. He was just cut out of the film, and Robert was just like, look, you ended up okay, didn't you? So guys, I don't know, like, should we be worried about Robert Downey Jr.? Because I really don't want to have to be worried about Robert Downey Jr., but should we be worried about him? You can say that Jonathan Majors is a victim of cancel culture, which is something that has been taking Hollywood by storm in the recent days. Cancel culture is, as the name states, when someone is cancelled, ostracized because of something that they have said or done at one point or another. And there is a lot of debate about this right now because we're being accused of being a little too trigger happy with this whole thing. There are people who get cancelled because of some really weird reasons, and then there are people who are getting cancelled because of things that happened ages ago. And right now, there's a really big question as to where we draw the line and kind of admit it if someone has been cancelled wrongfully. And MCU is no stranger to this. A really good example is James Gunn. James Gunn is a very prominent screenwriter, film director, film producer, and actor who worked for the MCU from 2014 until May 2023. He's mostly famous for his work on the comic book adaptation for Guardians of the Galaxy. He's a pretty big deal, and in 2015 he received the British Fantasy Award for the film. But James was fired by Disney on the 20th of July 2018 after the company was given several tweets from between 2008 to 2011 by the Daily Caller. These tweets showed statements that James had made where he was making fun of and pedo. The tweets read as follows. RT at Parleton, I like it when little boys touch. Shh. I'm doing a big Hollywood film adaptation of The Giving Tree with a happy ending. And the tree grows back and gives the kid a... For the record, I'm against and in real life, unless you're really, really, really hungry. These tweets were absolutely shocking. And there are many, many more of these that you can find online. I mean, he had to delete his Twitter, but this guy, he could write a book with just the tweets that he was saying at this time, with the most disgusting things that you can imagine. When all of this came out, James's response was, many people who followed my career know when I started, I viewed myself as a provocateur, making movies and telling jokes that were outrageous and taboo. As I've discussed publicly many times, as I've developed as a person, so has my work and my humor. It's not to say I'm better, but I am very, very different than I was a few years ago. Today, I try to root my work in love and connection and less in anger. My days saying something just because it's shocking and trying to get a reaction are over. So he said that he's matured a lot since he wrote these tweets, even though he was in his 40s when all these tweets were written. And then Chris Pratt, Bradley Cooper, Zoe Saldana, Vin Diesel, and many other people involved in the Guardians of the Galaxy wrote an open letter in support of him to get rehired. Like a ton of people pulled out their pens or their thumbs and started showing him support, basically saying that he really doesn't deserve any of this. He's a really nice person. These tweets are like from a really long time ago and he shouldn't be cancelled because of any of this. And seeing this, DC and many other studios basically lined up to try and hire him. And when all of this was going on, the MCU went to Disney, who's their parent company, and pretty much begged to let them rehire James Gunn. Now, the thing is that Hollywood is like really driven by money. So even when people get cancelled, if they have an impressive line of work, they are usually allowed to work in the background. A lot of people have done this, like Josh Whedon, who was the person responsible for creating Buffy. Apparently, he was a terrible human being, allegedly. He created a really terrible work environment, allegedly. The whole cast has come out basically just speaking about how toxic the work environment was. But anyway, he had a very strong portfolio and there are many companies that were still willing to work with him as long as he was quietly working in the background. And today he does have work as long as he's quietly writing in the background. But James never had to actually go through any of this. In October 2018, it was announced that he would write the screenplay for Suicide Squad for Warner Brothers after his dismissal from Disney. The option to direct the film also existed and he took it. In March 2019, he was rehabilitated by Disney, not sure what that means, and was allowed to work on the third part of the series, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which was released in May 2023. And then he left the company, and as of today, James Gunn is the CEO of DC Comics, and he is out here living his best life. I mean, guys, I can sit here and tell you many stories about the double standards that are being set out, not only by the MCU, but by the industry as a whole. But I also think that there is a lot more to the story than what meets the eye. Now that everything has been said, there is one really important thing that we need to note. And that is that Marvel has been in a lot of trouble. And the whole thing with Jonathan Majors and his legal issues, this is an opportunity that landed right on their doorstep at the perfect time. And just a heads up that from this point of the video, I'm going to be throwing out spoilers like it's nobody's business. Now, if you're one of the very few people on this planet who don't have any interest in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you don't really know what they've done to completely revolutionize the way that we consume television and film, well, I'm going to break it down for you. The MCU is currently divided into 6 phases, which feature a lot of different interwoven narratives that are pulled from the comic books that were written as far back as 1939. But the MCU itself was announced in 2008. So we were given these films to start with, and these were all part of phase 1. And we were told that we needed to pay very close attention to every single detail and every single character because it all leads to something big. So cool, we watched the amazing rollout, and then in 2012, we witnessed the first Avengers film, which brought together all these incredible characters. And Marvel had succeeded. They had brought together a group of brilliant characters, and they were all working together towards a common objective. And I remember watching this in the cinema, and I was just getting ready to leave after having the most intense, eventful movie experience that I'd ever had in my life. And then we got the post-credit teaser. And this gave us a hint of what was coming up. And that was when we were first introduced to Thanos. So Thanos is a mad titan that is in love with death. And from the very first glimpse, Thanos, who's portrayed by Josh Brolin brilliantly, you really get a bad feeling about him. You know that the intense, emotionally draining events that the Avengers are struggling with constantly, it's just the beginning. All they've done is just manage to buy themselves another day. And then you get phases 2 and 3 where they start to show us a little bit more of Thanos. And we see that he is a really amazing tactician, master manipulator, and overall badass. And they did this so cleverly. They didn't put too much of him out there. They just featured him in the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, and he appears in the mid-credits scene in Avengers Age of Ultron. While we're watching the Avengers really struggle to deal with the insane amounts of pressure and chaos, MCU were giving us time to connect with the characters, and we did. It felt like we were fighting the good fight with them. But Thanos was in the background. He was pulling all the strings, and the Avengers didn't even know about him. But we knew that he was there, and he was bigger than any threat that they'd ever faced before. And we knew that it was only a matter of time before he took things into his own hands and decided to reveal himself. So finally, he takes matters into his own hands, and he becomes the primary villain in the third Avengers film, Infinity War, which was directed by the Russo brothers. And this film is a thing of beauty. You'll lose count of how many emotions you go through just watching it. In the opening sequence, you see Thanos fighting Hulk. And Hulk does manage to throw a few punches in there, but it's still the most one-sided fight in the history of TV. And this is the opening scene. I mean, by the end of scene 1, you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, like, how are they gonna face this guy? How are we gonna get out of this? Like, what's happening? So Thanos had a really simple mission, which was to get all the Infinity Stones, which were in different places across the different films. And you're now starting to link everything together, and it's all just like, whoa, mind blown. And every once in a while, you're reminded as to how badass Thanos is by seeing him single-handedly defeat the Avengers. Like, it just keeps happening. Like, no one can even come close to him. So they all come together and they like put on a full war to try and beat Thanos. I mean, even with the help of other civilizations, and they still fail against Thanos. And the movie ends with a few of them unalived and Thanos having achieved his mission, which was to put all the stones in like this infinity gauntlet thing. And with a single snap, Thanos wipes out half of all life across the universe. So Thanos eventually gets vanquished in the second film, and Iron Man, who is played by Robert Downey Jr., who is pretty much the leader of the Avengers. I mean, he put the whole band together, but it's debatable whether he's the leader or not. But anyway, he sacrifices himself to make it happen. And this was all very well put together by the MCU, and they placed themselves in a really good position. But what happened next is like what happened to Game of Thrones after season 4. Like, yeah, it's that bad. Then they went from being like really amazing, like brilliant, to just like good. So right now, you can't even really tell how the stories are interlinked anymore. There's very little attention paid to character development. The narrative, it's the same as any other superhero film. Start, fight, win, go home. It's a wrap, everybody. That's it. So everyone has been like, what on earth is going on? Like, their viewerships have severely dropped. And unless you're like a hardcore Marvel fan, like, I mean, you're the type of person that reads the comic books, you go to Comic-Con, or maybe if you work in the film industry and you kind of like need to watch Marvel because it's your job to do that, like, unless you're one of those people, like, you've pretty much stopped watching. Marvel was like, okay, hold on, everyone, we've got another trick up our sleeves. And then they basically referred back to phase 3, and at the end of the Loki series, we were introduced to He Who Remains, And he is a variant of the new Big Baddie, which is a very complicated character, and I cannot fully go into it because we would spend the whole day sitting here talking about it. He is a ridiculously advanced human being. He is from the past, the present, the future, and he's basically spent many lifetimes controlling, amending, and manipulating different timelines. So we're introduced to him, and he is unalived pretty much as soon as we meet him. I mean, he knows he's gonna be unalived, but still, it's like, this is the villain that is gonna be taking over Thanos? Okay. He's probably saving all of his energy for something to do with Kang the Conqueror. And then we meet Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. And no offense to Ant-Man, but he isn't the best Avenger. I mean, he's not even really on the A-list. But we're introduced to the Big Baddie in this film, and he has a fight. There is a scene with ants. His powers don't even seem that great, and the ants defeat him. And we kind of know that he hasn't been defeated because the Avengers film is gonna be the Kang Dynasty, so something's gone wrong somewhere. He's still alive. I mean, but still, guys, his introduction, it's not that great. Like, how are we supposed to believe that this guy can face, let alone defeat, all of the Avengers? I mean, he can't even win a fight against ants. So the movie, it was overall really weird. The whole selling point of Marvel was that they were able to put together really well crafted characters, and the narratives would have a lot of depth. But with Quantumania, so many things were off with that movie. The plot was okay. The characters and their storylines were bland. The people just weren't buying it, and the movie got a lot of bad reviews. People were saying that Marvel has just forgotten the thing that made us fall in love with the MCU in the first place, and that is giving us well-rounded stories. The one thing that everyone did agree on unanimously when it came to the last couple of phases of the MCU was that Marvel had done the right thing by bringing Jonathan Majors in as the new Big Baddie. His portrayal of Kang and his variants was brilliant. But at the time when all of this was going down with Grace, the MCU was pretty much already trying to figure out how they were going to get themselves out of this problem. And Jonathan's legal problems were a convenient problem for them. So basically they scrapped Kang, who they had built and introduced poorly. And they are starting all over again with RDJ, who will be Dr. Jim. Since the trial, we've seen a lot more of Jonathan that we're used to. Meagan has said that she goes to a lot of events and he is usually with her to show her support. The issue with that is that he is not very comfortable with making public appearances. He never has been. He came out way before any of this happened and said that he does not deal with the fuckery of the industry. He just wants to make films and that's it. But at the same time, he is trying to support Meagan, and he has to unfortunately deal with a lot of scrutiny. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm really struggling to understand the extent of his awkwardness. I mean, they were at the Power Players Mix and Mingle event in LA, and Michael Ealy, who has worked with Meagan a lot in the past, hugged Meagan, and the video that was being shared made it look like Michael completely ignored Jonathan and just went straight in to hug his girlfriend. And then the camera zooms in on Jonathan's face and it looks like he is definitely going through something. And then you actually get to see the whole video. And the whole video shows that Michael actually went up to Jonathan first and they had their moment before he went up to Meagan. I will not lie, it still does look like something is going on with Jonathan though. Like, what the hell, Jonathan? With that in mind, Michael is a married man, happily married man, has been married for a very long time, way before Jonathan Majors came into the picture, and him and Meagan have been really good friends for a long time. So, and then they were at another event, and I believe that they were celebrating the release of Meagan's new film Divorce in the Black. And there's a video of Jonathan dancing that was released, and people were making all sorts of jokes about it. And the dude is just out there having the time of his life. So now he's also apparently back to the stage in his life where people are also making fun of him for his facial features.
This ugly nigga is good looking. Then all niggas is good looking.
And Meagan isn't having any of this. She's out here fiercely protecting him.
What's it like working with Cat on set?
Cat's sweetheart. He's a sweetheart. I seen his interview. He's a sweetheart. I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Cat's
But that's what I am gonna say.
What?
I'm sorry, but my man is sexy to me.
Yeah.
Okay, he's very, very sexy.
Okay,
to me.
okay. I forgot.
We just need to be all the way.
And now things are actually starting to get better for Jonathan. He won the Perseverance Award at the 2024 Hollywood Unlocked Impact Awards, and he just completely broke down in tears as he was making his speech. He said, "Perseverance means persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay, and the God I serve has put me in a position where I had to embody the word more than I wished or wanted." And it's also been recently announced that Jonathan has booked a couple of films. There's Merciless, which is an independent thriller, and Street Fighter, which is going to be distributed by Sony Pictures. And of course, Magazine Dreams has been picked up by new distributor Barcliff Entertainment and is due to be released early next year. I am personally really looking forward to it. And since we filmed this, we've received some really incredible news, and that is that Jonathan and Meagan are now officially engaged. And as I said, I think they are an incredible couple, and I know it seems a little bit more real now, and hopefully we are going to get to see them become the power couple that I think that they have the potential to be. Like, I'm so excited for them, honestly. Hopefully we're gonna also get to hear the little patter of little Jonathan and Meagan babies. No, so congratulations to the couple, and honestly, I wish them all the best. And the funny thing is that Grace was actually not happy about the outcome in court, and the fact that Jonathan went on to do an interview with Good Morning America. So she sued him again, and after this week, when he got engaged, suddenly it was announced that she had settled, and I think that she's finally decided to just let him go. So kudos to you, Grace. So there you have it, the extremely bizarre cancelling of Jonathan Majors. And I would really love to hear what you guys think. So please let me know in the comments section whether you agree or disagree. All comments, well, not all comments, keep it clean. But I would love to get your opinion. And this is a part where I give you my opinion. So I think that things could have been a lot worse for Jonathan. It seems like this was just meant to be some sort of learning curve for him. And he will recover from this. And he could actually get even bigger, because now he's forced to actually face his demons. And boy, he's got a lot to unpack. I just wish that he wasn't doing all of this while he was in a high-profile relationship. Now, do I think that he was responsible for Grace's injuries that night? I can honestly say that I don't know. The evidence for me just didn't cut it. But I also think that Jonathan Majors has got some pretty serious trauma from his childhood. And he has mentioned the fact that he has got a temper quite a few times. But also Grace could have very easily used that against him. I think she's a lot smarter than she lets on. Grace, to me, just doesn't really seem to give a crap about other people's boundaries. I don't care what you catch someone doing. Nothing justifies you chasing them down like that and then trying to call them 32 times in one night or whatever. It's funny because I was listening to the Cat Not Williams podcast, and she says, Grace, you're not supposed to smoke in public buildings in New York, same as London. There are people around you. You're not supposed to hold people captive in moving vehicles when they are trying to leave you. You're not supposed to scratch people because you want to take their property from them. You're not supposed to chase people if they don't want to be harassed. And the whole thing of her using his credit card that night to basically buy a group of strangers a night out in New York, like, that's insane. So now I'm sure that there are people who disagree with me, and that is absolutely fine. I really don't have any problems with disagreements. I just have one question. Why is it that every single situation that Grace brings up in court that is related to their arguments, why is it that all of those situations are based on her going out and having a few drinks? Why is it that none of their arguments have been around her working late or going out to get herself something expensive with his money, or, you know, like normal things that couples argue about? And I know some of you are going to say that that is also financial abuse. Well, there was an incident that was raised by his team when they went to Sag Harbor in March 2023. So not long before the night when it all went down. So they were out having lunch, and apparently Grace asked Jonathan when he'll be going to Wales for filming. And Jonathan replies that he isn't sure when he's going. And he also adds, like, why does it matter anyway? Because you can't just plan your life around me. And he makes a note that she needs to be more focused on getting herself work and making her own plans. Grace had been in New York, living in New York, since December 2022. And it was now March 2023. And she had not been working at all throughout that time. And then Grace got upset with him when he said this. And you know what she did? She took a bottle of wine, she got in the car, and she drove to the beach. And finally, as for the MCU, I think that the way that they've handled the whole situation was not great. Whoever's dealing with their PR, it would be nice if you could face these type of situations like head on and just kind of try to explain a bit more to the fans. Because I am personally starting to lose my faith a little bit in the MCU, which isn't great. I don't want that to happen. So anyway, will I watch the new Avengers film? Yeah, probably. So with that being said, we have reached the end of this video, and I know that it's taken me a very long time to put this one together and to post it. I just really wanted to make sure that it was a decent video. And these people, everyone that was mentioned here, they're all really secretive with their lives. So hopefully I have earned your subscription by now. And thank you for watching. Please like, comment, share, and I will see you again soon. Thank you.